I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the invocation. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance. Please stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning. Item 2.03, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? All those in favor? Motion passes 600. Item 2.04, establish agenda order. Mrs. Nally.
Seeing County Executive Shue is present this morning, and in deference to his busy schedule, I move that the board takes item 6.02, school facilities process, out of order and consider the item after the PTA report.
Second. All those in favor? Welcome, County Executive Shue and Chairman Mr. Walker. Item 2.05, recognitions. We do not have any recognitions today. Item 2.06, school and community highlights. Dr. Arlato.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I just wanted. Thank you. Just briefly mention two events that have occurred in our school system in the past week or so. I want to acknowledge the team at North County High School, Julie Cares and her team, along with Ms. Pelham, the emergency team. Nick is here with us, who really wrapped their arms around that community. With the loss of a student, it is absolutely devastating to a school community. And that school community came together in support of this student's family and friends and each other. And that would not have occurred not only with their feelings for each other and the community that has been built under Ms. Care's leadership as the principal, but also with the team that Ms. Pelham, Nick, and others have put together, again, to wrap their arms around our students and family. So I thank you for that. The other is, I just want a quick shout out to our facilities and maintenance division. These are folks that have, they work behind the scenes every day, sometimes 24 hours a day, but at times of inclement weather, as we've seen in the last few days, they have gone above and beyond. You won't know, but since about 3 o'clock on Saturday, this past Saturday, those crews are working on about 4 or 5 hours of sleep. We had buildings where power went out, buildings dropped to 19 degrees, pipes froze, and as we got them back online, we know what happens to water pipes when they unfreeze. And so it's been an incredible amount of work to get one of our high schools and 3 of our elementary schools up and running so that we could receive students today. They're not in perfect conditions, but these teams worked really hard on top of doing plowing and shoveling and salting and sanding the parking lots and the sidewalks. This is a team that just goes above and beyond, and I just felt like they really, under Mr. Shaknovich's leadership, he even had some frozen pipes in his own house he was dealing with while trying to take care of the school buildings. And so, Alex, to you and your team, thank you very much. Thank you.
Mrs. Birch.
I want to echo that. I probably to my own detriment, I read a little bit too many of the Facebook comments, and a lot of people were saying they couldn't understand how the schools would be ready because it was a code red yesterday. And I think some of those people don't understand how many of our employees, even when it's code red, do show up to work, do show up and do their work and get the schools ready for all of the teachers and students who need to get there. So thank you to all those people who work so hard for us every day.
And I just wanted to thank Todd Stanzione of Nantucket Elementary School for a wonderful evening called Hope Talks. He had back on February 11th, and he invited a number of us from the community and school system to talk to some of the young men and the parents that were there about the importance of mentoring. It was just a really wonderful evening. Item 2.07 is the CRASC report. Not sure we have anybody here. Okay, no CRASC report. They're at school. 2.08 PTA report.
Good morning, President Korbalak, Vice President Nally, Dr. Arlotto, and members of the board. For the record, I'm Pam Bukowski, President of the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. Since our last report several months ago, we've been busy with advocacy and other roles to support our schools, parents, and students in Anne Arundel County. A presentation by Anthony Alston from the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement resulted in eager open discussion that required another invitation to him to meet with our board. PTA leadership training continues to be given, usually on-site at the requesting school. Primary concentration has been in the Meade and North County clusters. Additionally, workshop sessions for completion and submission of all federal and state forms have been held in timely fashion so that our locals can meet the various deadlines for submission. In order to provide our members with an opportunity to be informed about the budget process, we were fortunate to have Alex Shaknovich and John Hammond to present information on the budget process at our mid-year general membership meeting. PTA continues to be a voice and a presence, not only for our children, but for our parents' families as well. PTA was represented at the November PIAC meeting and the January 8th Board of Ed budget meeting. In addition, during November and December, local PTA leaders were requested to contact their respective members and encourage their input on the Maryland Safe and Supportive Schools Survey, MDS-3, sponsored by the Maryland State Department of Education. There are many opportunities for parents to participate in the survey, and my hope is that we exceeded the projected participation level of 30%. At the school board level, input was requested to weigh in on options presented to the Board of Ed by the School Start Times Task Force report. A link with the results of that survey, in which 1,496 parents participated, can be found on the AACPS homepage. Countywide, our local PTA members have also been a voice and continue to participate in various advocacy efforts specific to clusters. And in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, many PTA members and their families participated in a day of action, helping to make a change in their communities. Finally, it was very exciting to be the county hosting a parent involvement panel town hall co-sponsored by Arnie Duncan with the Department of Education and Otha Thornton and National PTA at Bates Middle School. Even more gratifying was the local PTA presence on the panel of Helen Matioski, principal, and Jenny Boyven, PTA president of Hillsmere Elementary School. Finally, just a reminder that PTA is represented on the School Board Nominating Commission, having one of the 11 positions to select nominees to be presented to the governor for his selection. This is not a responsibility I take lightly, made even more important by the fact that there are over 30 exceptionally well-qualified candidates vying for the 2 available positions. The commission will meet this evening for deliberation and public vote of the names to go forward to Governor Hogan. Looking forward, I would like to call your attention and invite you to join us for upcoming events. A reception to honor students who contributed to our Reflections program will be held here in the boardroom tomorrow, Thursday, February 18th, from 6:30 to 7:30. We will also be co-sponsoring a legislative night with Maryland PTA on March 4th from 5 to 8 p.m. Our annual Founders Day dinner will be held on April 17th. Information packets have been sent out. And in closing, I would like to announce that we are accepting scholarship applications from graduating seniors attending any public high school site in Anne Arundel County. Scholarship application packets have been sent to guidance offices at our 12 comprehensive high schools, Cat North, Cat South, and Phoenix Academy. In addition, principals at the evening high schools have also been included. Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs continues in our efforts to be collaborative with Superintendent Arlotto and board personnel to support our school staff and general communities, to encourage and engage parents, and to advocate for all children. As always, PTA thanks you for these many opportunities to speak for every child, one voice.
Thank you, Pam. Item 6.02, School Facilities Study. This is a review item, and we have a presentation.
Good morning, Madam President. For the record, Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer, and allow me to have my two esteemed colleagues to the left introduce themselves for the record as well.
Jerry Walker, Chair of the Anne Arundel County Council.
Steve Shue, Anne Arundel County Executive.
And by way of brief background, it's important to note that back in 2005, Anne Arundel County Public Schools partnered with county government at that time and the Board of Education to undertake a seminal body of work that changed the course of this county, its capital development program, and the entire methodology by which we chart the guidance on a going forward basis in terms of our capital improvement plan. And that was by way of the strategic facility utilization study that was completed and published in June of 2006. That 10-year master plan was always proffered as such, and knowing that demography changes, general development plans change, economic drivers change, etc., that as that study neared its 10-year concluding point, we would have to begin the body of work required to reshape, reinform, and recalibrate that instrument to position us going forward into the next decade or even years beyond that. So I'm here this morning with my colleagues to the left to announce proudly that with the tremendous help of Anne Arundel County government on February the 10th of 2015, we entered into a contract with MGT of America Corporation to begin that body of work. The board recalls that in a presentation I gave to this body some time ago that it was critical that we begin that work in February of this year, 2015, such that we could have the deliverable completed by the end of August of 2015. That's critical because, as the board well knows, in September, customarily, we begin our capital budgeting process, and it concludes on our end in February through our traditional budgeting cycle. So it was critically important that we get the project on a trajectory so that we had that input information coming into that capital budgeting cycle. That concludes my remarks. I am certain that the two gentlemen to my left would have something to add as well.
Ready to go? Good morning, Madam President, Madam Vice President, members of the board, and Superintendent Arlotto. Thank you for having me this morning and giving me the opportunity to say a few remarks. 10 years ago, this board established a very innovative and methodical and objective way of approaching new school construction and refurbishment. That model has become that method has become a model for the rest of the state of Maryland and has been a resounding success. Now, 10 years down the line, it's time to update that plan, and I'm delighted that we will be working with MGT once again on this project. And I'm also pleased that the scope of the assignment has been expanded to look at the issue of the size of our high schools. Our schools in general, but specifically our high schools. As I've shared with many of you individually and with members of the public, I'm very concerned about the ever-increasing average size of our high schools. We now have the largest average-sized high schools in the state of Maryland. The average size of our high schools are larger than those of any surrounding jurisdiction and are among the largest average size high schools in the United States. A pledge to work with the board to examine how we can change the dynamic of school construction here in our county. The MGT study will set the framework for school construction over the next decade, so this is a very important undertaking. The study contains a scope of work that calls for an examination of the physical infrastructure of our school system and the needs of our school system moving forward. Once this issue is examined and all our stakeholders weigh in, I believe this study will lay the foundation for building smaller schools in our county. We've brought together all the stakeholders, the county council, the superintendent, board of education, and county government to work together to ensure the best possible educational future for our children. So thank you again for having me.
Good morning, Superintendent Orlado and Ms. Korbelak. Thank you for having us this morning. As you know, for the past 4 years, I've been on the council and have studied the capital budget very intently each year. And the MGT study of 2005-2006 was instrumental in assisting the council in making our decisions as we struggled with the limited resources the county government has and our desire to build as many schools as possible. And the beauty of that document was that it did help us to make decisions, not only giving us actual data to make those decisions with, but also sort of removing some of the politics that's associated sometimes with school construction. And so thank you very much, Dr. Orlado, Mr. Shagnovich, and the board for including us in this process and letting us have the opportunity to weigh in and sort of offer our thoughts and opinions of the scope of work that's been given to MGT. And so we thank you for the input, and we look forward to working with you in the future and on the results of this document and in crafting the budget going forward to really maximize the number of dollars that we have here in the county and make the best education system that we can from a facilities standpoint for our students. So thank you.
I'll take any board questions. Mr. Jackson?
I don't really have any board questions. I just want to say I think this is a first where we've had both the chair of the county council, county executive, all here and really moving us to where we need to go. I would have wanted 2 years ago for us to have moved forward with the MGT of America study, but you don't always get your way. And so today we're here, and I think we're on the cusp of getting something done in a very timely manner so that it can impact our next budget cycle come next year. And that's a good news story for our children. Our children need smaller schools and community schools in order to be able to really get the intimacy that they need in their education if we really want to tackle the achievement gap. And so I'm thankful to the superintendent for the relationships that have been built thus far in working with our county council as well as our county executive. And thank you.
I'd just also like to echo a big thank you for working with us. Teamwork gets things done, and we're looking forward to the results of the study. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may offer testimony during this public comment portion of the meeting. Speakers will be allotted 3 minutes each. The board asks that comments remain civil and appropriate for the various audiences that may be watching or viewing this meeting. Student-specific and personnel matters are confidential and cannot be discussed in this forum. This time is intended for speakers to voice their opinion and not necessarily as a question and answer period. Speakers may pose questions, but answers will be counted toward the 3-minute allotment. For the record, please give your name before speaking. Handouts should be given to the board assistant. I do not have any completed cards at this time. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board? Mr. Boniface?
Good morning, President Korbelak, Superintendent Arlotto, and members of the board. For the record, my name is Jonathan Boniface, lead organizer of Bill Crofton High School. I am here this morning to thank the Board of Education for putting the ball in motion last November to update the 2006 MGT study. With all that has changed in the past 9 years in Anne Arundel County, this was a smart move that should clearly identify our school's system's priorities through the next decade. This very board will have either 4 or 5 new members by the time this updated study is delivered. You have ensured that they have the latest data to work with. Thank you. Superintendent Arlotto, I would like to thank you and your team for working together with County Executive Hsu and the County Council to develop the scope of the new MGT study. You, the County Executive, and the County Council are setting up a relationship that will be an example to other counties. Working together, there is no doubt in my mind that you can make Anne Arundel County even better than it is today. And a better Anne Arundel County begins here in our schools with our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? Okay, we will move on to item 4.01. This is an action item, the superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2016 operating and capital budget. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. Let's see if I can get this number correct. I recommend the approval of the $1,100,971,472 operating budget and any approved amendments. I also recommend the approval of the $163,090,000 capital budget and any approved amendments.
Is there any board discussion? Patty?
Okay, thank you. At the request of the superintendent, I move that the board increase the board contribution, for example, employer share from all funds in the internal service for healthcare fund by $1,363,277 to fully account for general fund position increases and grant changes. There are no changes to expenditures. Therefore, this request also requires an offsetting reduction of $1,363,277 in the restricted revenue from other sources recorded in the general fund per state board opinion number 14/16.
Any board questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this motion? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Mrs. Burge.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Korbelak. I want to say we've been asked over and over again, as I'm sure many people in the audience realize, to add funds to the budget to change school start times because the research is there, and that we shouldn't ignore the research and the academic recommendations that have been made. And that's really gotten me thinking. And I can probably also thank Mr. Webb for this, because he has frequently told us that we should be presenting a budget that outlines what we really need and not just what we think we can get. So I've been really thinking about what it is that we really need and what recommendations are we not meeting right now. And it turns out there's a lot of them. In order to keep the costs down, I'm not going to propose recommendations. I'm going to propose some amendments to the superintendent's budget that only impact staffing ratios. I'm not going to go into all of the programs that are out there that are research-based that we know would impact our students positively and benefit a reduction in the achievement gap. I'm also going to hold off on school start time amendments because I know we're going to be making some of those later. But what I would like to do is move that the board add $18,521,816 allocated in the following amounts placed in the appropriate state categories to the superintendent's recommended operating budget. $9,199,795 to add an additional 107.3 12-month school counselors to bring AACPS in line with the recommended ratio of 250 students per school counselor. $6,699,170 to add 90.4 teachers, in addition to those contained within Dr. Arlotto's recommended budget, to bring class sizes at all grades into alignment with our prescribed student-teacher ratios. $1,903,335 to add 19.7 school psychologists to bring caseloads into alignment with recommended ratios. $590,192 to add 8 English language acquisition teachers, in addition to those contained within Dr. Arlotto's recommended budget, to bring caseloads into alignment with recommended ratios. $159,324 to add 3 bilingual facilitators, in addition to those contained within Dr. Arlotto's recommended budget, to bring caseloads into alignment with recommended ratios.
Is there any board discussion?
May I just, basically all of these things add up to $18,521,816. These are all based on sound, valid research These are all things that at this point we don't have the money to do. They're all things that would help bridge the achievement gap. These are all things that would help our students. These are all things that would benefit everyone in this school system. I'm fairly certain, though, that the reason that Dr. Arlotto didn't put them in the budget is because he's outlined a plan for how he thinks we can best bridge the achievement gap. That he's looked at all of these things, that he's taken everything into consideration. That's his job. That's why we hired him. I would love to be able to fund all of these things, every single last one of them. But that's $18.5 million for things that would benefit all of our students, but we don't have the money for. I'd actually like to withdraw this amendment, but I wanted to put it out there, make everyone realize what we need and what we aren't asking for and what we can't get because the money's not there. If it's all right with you, Mr. Webb, thank you.
Okay, that motion has been withdrawn. Ms. Chaudhry.
I move that the board add $159,324 to add 3 bilingual facilitators in addition to those contained within Dr. Arlotto's recommended budget to bring caseloads into alignment with recommended ratios. And the reason I'm doing this is because currently we have 14 Spanish bilingual facilitators serving an average caseload of 380 families each. However, at the current pace, about 65 new families are added every month, and there are 7 months remaining, which would bring the caseload back up to 414 families by the end of this year. If Laura and her department get the additional positions requested, that will bring the number back down to 363. And that is exactly what's going to happen if we add 3 extra positions. You will use 2 of them as Spanish bilingual facilitators. And then the other 0.5 would be used for a Pakistani bilingual facilitator and a Chinese bilingual facilitator. Bilingual facilitators provide a bridge for non-English speaking parents and our school community. Without them, many students that do not speak English will face an achievement gap because they have no one guiding them through our school system. The achievement gap is an important matter in our community, something we have been trying to close for years now. This is an important step to our goal for closing the achievement gap, so I urge the board to vote in favor of 3 extra positions for bilingual facilitators.
Do we have a second? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, ma'am. As I was studying the budget over the last 2 or 3 or 4 months, one of the things under the bilingual facilitators that it says, it's actually on page 328 of the budget book, implications if not approved. It says currently we only have 15 bilingual facilitators for the entire county, some serving as many as 500 families and up to 23 schools. We are very vulnerable for an OCR complaint as we are not complying with all laws regarding language access. So my question is, what laws are we not complying with respect to language access?
Dr. Arlotto.
Thank you, Ms. Korbelak. Mr. Jackson, I'm assuming what is referenced because there is no law that I know of that speaks to a ratio of bilingual facilitators in a local education agency. I don't know of law, and if there is one, my team is not able to point it out to me. I'm assuming what it is referencing is in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI. It talks about school systems providing effective language assistance to limited English proficient parents. And that takes place not only with bilingual facilitators, but translation of documents, translation in meetings. translation of websites. And so it takes place. We also have language link. So if a parent walks in off the street and is unable to communicate with a secretary or registrar at a school, we have the ability, we pay for the process of utilizing Language Link, where we can get a translator on the phone to make those immediate connections with the parents. So that's all part of it. So there is no law that I know of that we are in violation of. But certainly, as our numbers grow of English language learners, particularly for parents, we want to be able to keep up with that need, and that's the reason we added 3 bilingual facilitators. There's now a motion, an amendment before you to add an additional 3. But I don't know that we are in violation of the law, because the law speaks to the law speaks to make sure that you're providing some access, which I think we are doing, but need to continue to do a better job of.
Okay, so the statement here is maybe not correct in that we're not complying with all laws regarding language access that's in the budget book, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so because that was going to lead me to my next question. If we're not complying with a law, then how many bilingual facilitators do we need in order to ensure that we're complying with the law? But hey, if we are complying with the law, whatever that law is, then I'm very, very pleased to add to vote for 3 additional bilingual facilitators in addition to what's in the budget. Thank you.
Ms. Chaudhry?
When I was, conducting the research for proposing this, I was told that we are required by federal law to provide language access to parents, which means providing parents equal access to info from the schools regardless of the language they speak. And this is according to, as Dr. Arlotto stated, the Civil Rights Act. And what I was thinking is that because that there's such an increase in the Spanish population, and because at the end of this year we're going to have 414 families that are going to be needing bilingual facilitators, that we add this, because then if we don't, then we're going to be at a risk for an Office of Civil Rights complaint. So that's why I was adding it.
Mrs. Ritchie?
If I recall correctly, last year we added some bilingual facilitators. Do you remember how many we added last year? We added 3 last year as well. And so we've asked for another additional 3 this year.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is going to be a really difficult meeting with these amendments, because in theory I support that, but in reality I'm going to vote against it. And the reality is that the money's not there. And there are so many things that have to be done within our school system. You know, we talk about the school psychologist, and we talk about mental health, and we talk about health and safety for kids, and bilingual facilitators. I'm going to fight for the 3 that we have, and hope that we're going to be able to fill those, because we're already, I believe it was 24 million over the request for maintenance of effort. I believe we've been told we're only going to get maintenance of effort. As I've been thinking about this, and Ms. Korbelak and I were talking, about not sleeping well last night and all the information and things. As I was thinking about this last night, I remember one of my first meetings, and I said, "You don't get what you don't ask for," and I still believe that. But I also have grown a little bit, just a little bit, in the knowledge of the way that things really actually work, and they really actually work in the way that we have to work together. And it's not that I don't support the fact. I support the fact that Ms. Burge brought forward that $18 million request. The fact is that we all know what we need, and getting there is the challenge. Dr. Arlotto, we went through a specific search for the superintendent, what we wanted. We asked the public for input. We asked the community for input. We asked elected officials, everybody for input on what they wanted in terms of what was their priorities in the school system. And our priorities were that we needed to close the achievement gap. Everybody said that. And so Dr. Arlotto has developed a plan that we've approved by the fact that we've allowed them to go forward to work on those things. And I think that sometimes we undermine that a little bit by now going back and trying to redo. It's not that I don't believe we need the facilitators. It's not believe we don't need the psychologists. It's not believe we don't need all of these things. But we have to choose which ones, and that's the tough part. And so while I fully support and agree that we need them, I respectfully will not be able to vote for that amendment.
Mr. Webb.
I just wanted to say, excuse me, you talked about we all know what we need, and that's not really the case. We all know what we need. Central office knows what we need, but the public oftentimes doesn't know what we need, and the county council oftentimes doesn't know what we need. So if we don't point it out to them, oftentimes they get the, I believe, in fact, I've talked to a councilman who absolutely had the opinion that we were asking for the moon with the budget we submitted. They don't understand on many occasions we are already trying to be very fiscally responsible, very conservative in the budget we submit. I think it's very important that they know the actual numbers, and they've got to get out there at some point in time.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I very much appreciate Ms. Ritchie's comments. I think of it more along the lines of what Mr. Davis used to tell us, told me for 5 years of being on the board. The asking is not the same as the getting. Right now, you're right, we do have to choose, but we don't have to choose today. Today, what we're voting on is what we need to be asking for relative to what this school system needs to tackle the gap. And while I fully support the hard work, and I'm thankful for the hard work that the administration has done, I just believe there's still some gaps relative to tackling and eliminating the achievement gap. And this is one area that I believe we still have some gaps in. We really need to be putting in probably 10 or 15 bilingual facilitators. And this is a move to bring us into somewhat something of what I'm comfortable in on top of the 3 that Dr. Arlotto has recommended. And so, you know, today what we are about is the asking. When we come back in May and June, I think it's June, whatever it is, we'll be talking about the getting. And then we can have the conversation. We know for the most part, maybe it is only going to be maintenance of effort that we're going to get. That's what all the signals in the tea leaves say. But that should not stop us from asking for what exactly we need relative to helping our children, our youngest children, and our populations, in this case, the bilingual facilitators, to be able to help our children in our schools do what they need to do. Thank you.
Mrs. Burge.
Just wanted to make a correction. We only would need 3 more bilingual facilitators to bring us up to the recommended ratios, as the amendment that I had introduced earlier had said. And if you do feel strongly about the asking, then you should remake my $18 million amendment, because that's what we need. But again, I personally believe that we have to trust in what our superintendent and his staff have done in terms of paring things down. There are some small adjustments that we need to make, then I think that we can do that. But overall, I think we have to trust that he has a plan, which that is what we hired him for, to attack this gap. And I think that's what his budget does. And Mr. Webb, as you've said, you always, try and explain to people what we really need. Hopefully the fact that I introduced this amendment that you so kindly seconded earlier will help some people out there understand that we aren't asking for everything that we need. So thank you very much for seconding it earlier, because that is part of the conversation that I wanted to get out there, that we aren't asking for everything that we need, that we are paring it down. So I do appreciate your assistance earlier.
Mrs. Ritchie.
And just to follow up also, and I fully agree, because there's times when it doesn't appear that people seem to understand what it is that we really are doing. And so a few months back, Ms. Korbelak and Dr. Arlotto sat before the county council to kind of tell them what was going on and where we are. And at that time, they brought forward a comparison sheet comparing 2005-2006 school year with the 2014-15 school year, which I think really is an eye-opener, because in 2005-06 we had a little over 3,000 9,400 Hispanic students. We have over 9,400 Hispanic students now, and 10 years later. So those are real numbers, and that's real evident, and people can see that. So I think that we're doing some of that job now in terms of trying to make people understand what it is and how we need to move forward. And, the county council received that. Hopefully they read it and looked at it and saw, when we talk about kindergarten, we had full day kindergarten, we had 2,008 students. This year, or in 2014-15, we have over 6,000 students. Full day kindergarten, pre-K students, we had 369 students. This year we have 1,085. So we're growing, and when they make, I believe our budget is 3% over what maintenance of effort was, if that's the correct number. So, we're asking for a little bit over to meet and address these kind of needs, and we keep chipping away because people keep saying, I don't know why you can't just do it what you have. We have class sizes of 25 students in kindergarten. That's not beneficial to students in the achievement gap when they're 25. We have to find ways to wheedle those down. So, again, we have to trust and move forward.
I'd also just like to echo and point out that last year we had a deficit of 9 bilingual facilitators to bring caseloads into alignment, and I think the plan that we've put in place was to add 3 a year. I'm sure we'll be back next year asking for 3 more if this motion doesn't pass, but we are moving in the direction of getting ourselves into alignment with the recommended ratios. Is there any public comment on this motion? All right, all those in favor of Ms. Chaudhry's motion to add 3 bilingual facilitators to the budget? All those opposed? Motion fails 3-4. Ms. Chaudhry?
I move that the board add $2,797,476 allocated in the appropriate state categories so that this board has the flexibility to explore COLAs, steps, and other avenues as we negotiate with our bargaining units.
Would you like to speak to your motion at all?
I think what we're trying to do here with this money is that we're just adding more money in there so we have more space to explore more avenues as we go through bargaining. Because I know with the different units, there's different things that will benefit them. Maybe a COLA will benefit everyone and not tack as much as it would AEL. So we're just looking at different ways to make everyone happy with this.
Mrs. Burge?
I'm going to be in favor of this because I think this is the amount of money that we need in order to be able to fulfill our contractual obligations to all of our bargaining units. So it might even be a slightly more than we actually need to fulfill those contractual obligations. But I feel that this is an amount that I'm comfortable with in order to feel as though we've met our contractual obligations. And this is one place where I do feel like the asking is important because we do have contracts, and I think that it is important to ask for what we have bargained for in the past. Thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie?
I just have a question having to do with, and you may or may not have the answers. I think if we were going to only give the steps out of the allotted money that we have without this motion here, do we know how many employees would be affected and not affected by that? So how many people would get steps and how many, and that's across all units, because if we give the steps, if we only have the money that we have, that we've requested, we're not even sure we're going to get that, but if we only have that allotment of money, then it can only be used for, we've got it allotted for a 2% COLA. That's a placeholder for 2% COLA for the entire workforce. So my question is, if using the allotted money, how many employees would receive steps and how many employees would receive nothing?
Well, to your point, a COLA is an across-the-board increase. So a COLA is applicable to each and every employee, represented or non-represented. Right. Everybody would receive a uniform percentage increase, and that's applied against what their base salary is. The difference with a COLA is if the Board of Education decided to issue a COLA to all employees. So you're going to set aside a COLA and issue a step, which is what I think your question is. So if it's a step uniformly applied to all of the employees, 738 of our 9,956 employees would not receive a compensation increase in the step scenario versus the COLA scenario. So 738 is your direct answer.
And that's across the board. But if it's only for Unit 1, if we only are able to give, and I'm not asking about with this, the money here in this allotment would be able to do that for steps for the entire grouping. I'm asking about if we only use the money that we have requested without this amendment, it wouldn't even be enough. That would not be enough even for all the whole employees thing.
That's correct.
It would only because we've been getting requests from Unit 1 people to please give them their steps. So my question is, if it was only for Unit 1, how many employees would then be affected?
In Unit 1 itself, in the step model, there would be 649 employees that would not receive a compensation increase.
Okay. In addition to the rest of the staff, there would only be the only ones who would get that would be the Unit 1 employees. So AEL wouldn't get it, the AFME wouldn't get it, all the other people would not get anything.
What the superintendent's recommendation was for essentially a cash equivalent of a 2% across the board.
I know.
Placeholder, and that had a value of 11.7 million, 11.8 million.
Okay.
To round it up. As you know, in some of the bargaining units, a step is worth more than a 2% COLA. In some of the other bargaining units, a 2% COLA is worth more than a step. So it is sort of differentiated by bargaining unit, based on that spectrum. So for example, the difference would be for TAC, you would have to add $1,594,506 to bridge the gap from a 2% COLA to a step. Okay. For AEL, if you wanted to move from a 2% COLA to a step for AEL, you would actually be reducing Dr. Arlotto's budget by $405,615. ASME would require an increase of $291,063. SAAC would require an increase of $808,795. For Unit 5, professional support A through E, it would actually be a reduction in Dr. Arlotto's recommendation of $117,953. For professional support grade F, it would be an increase of $30,624. And finally, for executive staff, it would be an increase as well of $72,488. So taking those pluses and minuses that I just read through, Ms. Ritchie, that amounts to the proposal that's been introduced before you. So that's how you arrive at the $2,797,476. So it's a series of pluses and minuses going across. But as Ms. Chaudhry said, this would provide the Board of Education with the maximum amount of flexibility. So you could, on a unit-by-unit basis, then decide possibly to give a step to one unit or possibly give a COLA to another unit. And again, so I think the board, the superintendent, and the negotiating team would have more flexibility under the model that's proffered by the amendment than they currently do underneath of the base budget that's been put forward.
And I'm going to vote for this for that specific reason, because what we have done in the past has been, before I became on the board, it was a lot of the piecemeal. It was every man for themselves kind of thing, and whoever screamed loudest got the best, and so forth. And so what we've really tried to do is to ensure across the board that we're not picking and chooses, who is our favorite child this month. And so by increasing this would allow us then again to be able to not just fully do one group, but to be able to look at the entire school system. And so for that purpose, because I believe in the one for all for one kind of thinking, that I will vote for this amendment.
Mr. Jackson?
Thank you, ma'am. Just to make sure that I have the numbers correct, you said 738 total employees out of our however many 9,000, 10,000 employees would not receive a step. And I thought you said 649 of those would come out of Unit 1. So that would be 89 are going to come out of some other unit. Can you break down that 89?
Sure. If you apply the step and only the step model, in addition to the 649 Unit 1 TAC members, there would be 13 AEL members that would be ineligible for a compensation increase as a result of the step. There would be 43 AFSCME Unit 3 members. There would be 17 SAAC Unit 4 members. And finally, there will be 16 Unit 5 professional support members.
Thank you.
I also feel very strongly that we need to honor our collective bargaining agreements. I realize that we're in renegotiations with most of our unions, but based on what we negotiated in prior years, we do have an obligation to at least ask for the step increases. So I will also be supporting this amendment. Is there any other public comment on this amendment? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. And Ms. Chaudhry.
I move that the board add $111,624 allocated in the appropriate state categories for an additional pre-kindergarten teacher and aide in order to be able to accommodate all Category 1 and Category 2 pre-kindergarten students based on this year's enrollment figures. And there's about 20 extra Category 2 students that were unaccounted for in the superintendent's 240 extra seats. So this money would cover those 20 extra students in Tier 2. And the reason that I felt very strongly about this was because last year 6,308 students went to kindergarten, 1,900 of which went to pre-K. And this includes mostly Tier 1 students, which are farm students, as well as low-income students. And this number also includes the private pre-K students. So there was about 4,408 students that did not attend pre-K at all, whether it was public or private. And with a growing farm population and a growing population of students for which English is their second language, we need more seats. Dr. Arlotto's budget would include all of the Tier 1 students, which are the farm family students and the low-income students, but it would not cover all of Tier 2. And Tier 2, it's important that we cover it because Tier 2 students, there's as much of an achievement gap for them as there is with Tier 1 students because they have to go through just as many hardships, I think. And the achievement gap is an important matter in our community and something that we've been trying to close up for years now. So this is an important step to our goal for closing the achievement gap. So I urge the board to vote in favor of pre-K expansion. If a student can't develop basic skills and a good foundation for school and learning, they will be less likely to succeed in the future.
Mrs. Ritchie.
Could you tell me what Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 is, the requirements?
Yes, ma'am. Tier 1, these are state determinations. So Tier 1 are our students that are living in poverty based on their farms, free and reduced price meals. The Tier 2 and Tier 3 students are those that are ELL, learning English as a second language, and then our special education students. And then what along the state levels referred to as Tier 4 students is everybody else. So we are required federally to make room for our Tier 1 students, those that are in poverty, which we do. Again, you have made mention of this several times, as I have as well, and Ms. Korbelak, that we are not compensated for that in our maintenance of effort. So while kindergarten is mandated by the state, pre-kindergarten is not, so it does not become part of those maintenance of effort numbers. And some numbers that Ms. Chaudhry shared with you, we've got a little over 1,800 students in pre-K, which are not part of our maintenance of effort numbers. But we nonetheless provide education to those 1,800 plus students. But we are federally mandated to make sure that we include the Tier 1, those students living in poverty.
And that's extremely important. I didn't realize this because I always just thought everybody had all-day kindergarten. And then I found out Virginia doesn't. And I'm thinking, they don't have all-day. I mean, who doesn't have all-day kindergarten? I mean, we're trying to figure out how to get all-day pre-K or get all of our kids into pre-K. And so, you know, that says a lot about our school and our school system, because we understand that the earlier we get them, the better off, and we're going to be able to reach them. When we had that presentation from the infants and toddlers, when those parents came forward and talked about these kids that are like, we have like 900 kids in infant and toddlers, and I didn't even have a clue about that. I mean, so that's just a real eye opener in order to be able to prepare kids to be able to learn and to therefore meet the achievement gap. So I'm very supportive of that.
Is there any public comment on this motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Patty, you're opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Mrs. Nally.
I move that the board add $59,964 allocated in the appropriate state categories to move the 16.5 high school counselors currently working 210 days to 12-month status in order to better address the college and career readiness needs of our high school students.
Second.
Is there any comment? I guess I would just like to speak to this motion as well, that as a parent of one high school student, formerly 4 high school students, some of our counselors in some of our high schools are not there certain weeks during the summer. And if a student is getting ready to apply to college, for example, the Common App comes out August 1st and they need to get some information from their guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor isn't there, then the other guidance counselors who are working 12 months either have to pick up the slack or the student has to wait until that guidance counselor returns to work. And same thing with high school scheduling, as you probably are well aware, all the different scheduling issues that goes into high school in particular. So we wanted to try to make it more equitable at the high school level by making sure that all of the guidance counselors could work for 12 months a year. Mrs. Nally?
Also, if indeed there is a difficulty, we pay those who are not 12 months. Sometimes we have to pay them per diem to come back and work for the overload. And so again, that is an expense, and it's one that I think could be reflected in a cost. I'm not going to ask you, Alex, to figure that out, but I just think this is an extremely important. I've heard from counselors, I've heard from many folks on this who in the school system who feel that we are doing a disservice to some of our high schoolers with not having this position year round. Thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie?
And I believe that we've been migrating this. This is just to help to close this last little grouping up. Is that correct? I mean, we've been slowly moving this along. When we hire new counselors, we've been hiring them as 12-month employees, because there was a time when we scaled them back to 210, and then we've decided that that's just not effective. So what this is doing is basically closing that little loop in that circle. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. A number of years ago, under a former superintendent, when we were in the deepest throes of the economic downturn, we had to make some very, very difficult position adjustments, decisions on the cost containment side. And one of those decisions was to make some of these counseling positions either 200 or 200 day. And we've been slowly over time, as the budget permits, unwinding that decision that was made 5 years ago or so. So this would, as you said, begin to help us continue to close the gap and slowly migrate the folks back towards the 12-month status.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 700. Mrs. Nally.
I move that the board add $96,616 allocated in the appropriate state categories to add a 1.0 school psychologist position so that all high schools have at least one full-time psychologist.
Mrs. Nally, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think I'm asking for, looking and talking maintenance of effort and knowing our budget. I'm asking for we need more, but I'm asking for what I feel is the minimum that we need to make sure that all high schools have at least full-time. I think that is just a basic that we need. So that's the reason that I would like to see this added.
Mrs. Burge.
I would like to make an amendment to Mrs. Nally's motion to change it to 2 school psychologist positions, which would then be $193,232 allocated in the appropriate state categories, which is still a far cry from the 19.7 school psychologists that are needed, but gets us a little bit further along our way.
Mr. Jackson.
I absolutely support. Actually, I wanted to make a motion to make it 3, but I'll stay at 2 because I think we're amending an already existing motion. So I'll go with 2 right now. Thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie.
Having gotten those same emails, I fully understand the need for the school psychologist and when we talk about mental health. But I'm afraid that if we push too far, we get none. And so I understand that needing to add 1 to do that, but I'm more inclined to just do the 1 in the high school, so that every high school at least has 1 psychologist. When we're talking, and that's, unfortunately the caseload is astronomical in that instance, but it's necessary. And I hopefully in the years to come, as we start to have some better discussions, and we accept that mental health is not a stigma, and we allow people to be able to access health care in a good way, we can start to not only build the ones that we have within our school system, but also look at our communities and ensure that we have good mental health available to all persons who need it. And, that's again, working over stigmas and so forth.
Ms. Chaudhry.
I was originally going to amend Patty's amendment, make it 5, but I guess we'll stick to 2 right now. And the reason I think 2 is important is because that 1 is going to cover all of the high schools, but then we have middle school and elementary students. So I think we just need that 1 extra, because middle school, a lot of people don't think it's as much drama as high school is, but you're forgetting that in middle school, kids are going through puberty and they're going through all these changes. So maybe having that 1 extra and making it 2 is important. So I will fully support Ms. Burge's amendment.
Mrs. Burge.
I just want to say, as someone who has had the privilege of dealing with school psychologists in both the elementary school and the middle school level. They are very much needed, and I would very much appreciate them having additional support because they are stretched very, very thin.
I just wanted to make a note that the high schools that don't have a full-time school psychologist at this point are Chesapeake and Southern. So this one position that Mrs. Nally asked for would at least bring those into a full-time psychologist position. And I understand what Ms. Chaudhry is saying about having another person available to our middle and elementary. All those in favor of Mrs. Burge's amendment to Mrs. Nally's motion? Opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Okay. So we're voting on the motion to add school psychologists. Okay. So the motion now is to add $193,232 allocated in the appropriate state categories to add 2 school psychologist positions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 6-1. Mrs. Ritchie.
I move that the board add $62,768 allocated in the appropriate state categories to move the 12 assistant principals currently working 210 days to a 12-month status.
Mrs. Ritchie, would you like to speak to the motion?
This again is also the bringing it up to the putting them back into alignment where we need them to be. Currently, the small group 12 assistant principals that don't work during the summer are then not able to be as fully involved and engaged in getting the schools ready for students to open. And there's a lot of work that happens in the summertime in terms of preparing for students. So this would just, as the counselors did, would just do the same thing with the assistant principals.
Is there any public comment on this motion? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Mrs. Nally.
I move that the board adds $1,385,152 allocated in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours to ensure that no high school starts before 7:45 a.m. and no comprehensive elementary or middle school ends after 4:20 p.m. I further move that school hours be adjusted accordingly and become effective no later than the start of the 2016-2017 school year.
Mrs. Nally.
I fully believe in starting high schools later. I've said this publicly. However, I do not think, and I've looked at it, and I have been an elementary school principal, teacher in the system over 40 years, and I do not believe that it is good for elementary students I think it's as unhealthy as the high school, starting when it does now, to have elementary school students some of the times, and I said this publicly before, would, if we just simply pushed it back, some of those students would arrive at their schools. They now get there at right now at 9:15. If they arrived at almost 10 o'clock, they would immediately go, and some of them would have to go to specials, art, music, PE. They would have to have lunch. Those things are kind of important. And they wouldn't start their first academics until 1 o'clock in the afternoon in many cases. By the time they had PE and by the time they had lunch and recess. That is unconscionable. I cannot approve that. I think that anyone would tell you that it is not, that would not be good for elementary students. So and the other the worry I have is them getting home. We look at the daylight hours, and elementary students, many of them, and I look in my neighborhood, they walk. I mean, they walk. The bus comes right out in front of my house on the main road, and then they walk back into their communities. And dark is, and we don't have sidewalks. And so I think it's extremely important. I personally think 4:20 is late for them, for an elementary school to get out. But in discussions, I'm trying to look at a beginning step where we can do this and not make it unhealthy for elementary students and make it fiscally viable for our system as a beginning. So that's me. That's my thoughts.
Mrs. Burge.
I don't think this is an acceptable beginning. I didn't think it was acceptable last year when we proposed changing it by 13 minutes. It's absolutely not acceptable to change elementary schools getting out by 28 minutes. My child's elementary school used to be one of the latest elementary schools in the county, and I was horrified at thinking that those children would have gotten out 13 minutes later. To think that they would be getting out 28 minutes later, that means that everyone knows that dismissals don't happen immediately at elementary schools. It takes 10 or 15 minutes to get all of those kids out of school. So, 4:20, if a school was getting out at 4:20, those kids would not be leaving that building until at least 4:30. They would not be getting home until at least 4:45. I don't know about you all. Maybe my kids were unusual, but my kids were in bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock. So you have kids who are getting home at 4:45 and going to bed 2.5 hours later. That's not acceptable. I mean, when is a child supposed to do anything? To eat dinner, to do their homework, to play soccer, to go to Girl Scouts, any of those things. This is not an acceptable solution. We haven't found it yet. We are in the process, from what I understand, of putting out our RFP for software, for transportation routing software. We need to figure out what's going to work. We don't need to put a Band-Aid on this. This is a Band-Aid, and it's a Band-Aid that's going to hurt some of our children. It is not going to work. I would be horrified if I had my elementary, and I don't know if those kids that go to bed at 7 or 7:30, let me just tell you, they're monsters by 5. I don't know what they would be like in school at 4 o'clock. You would not have wanted to deal with my middle school child when he was in elementary school at 4 o'clock. In fact, when he was in kindergarten, you didn't want to deal with him after noon. So, I think that we're, like you said, for them to be doing their academics in the afternoon at 4 o'clock, not a good thing. I also have to take exception to the many parents who have told me that we never do anything for the high school kids. Every investment that we have made for the past, since I've been on this board, has been high school. All of our magnets, everything we do has been middle school and high school. The first year we make investments in elementary school, people say, when are you going to look at the high schools? How come you don't think about the high schools? Every investment we've made has been in the high schools. I know that this is a problem. I know start times are a problem, but let's do it right. Let's not hurt some kids to help other kids. We need to make sure we do it right, and this is not the answer.
Ms. Chaudhry.
I agree with Ms. Burge on this one. I think originally when I was looking at start times, I didn't like any of the options that were presented. And then when I was presented with this, I guess I liked the fact that it was only $1 million compared to the $9 million that most of the other options offered. But I still don't think this is where we have to go. I don't think school start times is currently a huge issue right now that we have to look at. Maybe next year we can look at it again, but with everything that's going on, I don't feel like, especially because 7:45, 28 minutes is not going to make a difference. Do you guys honestly think high school students are going to go to sleep 28 minutes late before? I don't know. it's too much of a small impact. According to the American Pediatrics Association, they wanted 8:30. They said no, that schools should not be starting before 8 o'clock. This is before 8 o'clock by 15 minutes. They have to be on buses by 7:30. They have to be at their stops. It's not that much of a difference. I don't think we should be spending $1.3 million on something that's going to make such a small impact.
Mrs. Ritchie.
You know, we had a timeline set out where the superintendent was asking for a specific amount of money for the software so that we could run the scenarios, because everybody said this is what we need to do. We need to have the scenario for that, the software. And what I learned today was that one of the problems we had in the past was we didn't have the GIS mapping ability. And so even when we bought the software before, when it did the ones that didn't work, was because we didn't have the mapping ability, and so therefore it was taking us across the rivers and doing things that were inappropriate. But now that we're going to be working with the county government with their mapping abilities and our software, it's going to give us a much better picture. And I too don't agree with just slapping something in there and holding it, because once we do that, then that becomes what everybody fights for, is that option. And the fact is that we have to look at all these different options. We haven't done anything like studied traffic patterns and what the impact this is going to be when you're worried about kids getting out of school at 4:20 and then getting home after the dismissal. Now we're talking about a whole different traffic patterns, and what is that going to do for buses, and how's that going to impact how much even later they get home. So while we have the beginning part of it in terms of getting kids to sleep longer and to be more rested to go to school, we have the ending part of it where we have kids not getting home until 5 o'clock, and some of our youngest learners, and there's not been any studies that have shown what that impact is. So I'm not in favor of adding any money that's going to talk about that part. I'm in favor of looking at the routing software, other than but making sure that's not taken from someplace else to do that. By that I mean, I don't want the county council to move money within our budget to make that occur. It needs to be new money added to the currently existing request, as opposed to having that. So there's a lot more that needs to be done on this. You could take an example. I think Montgomery moved theirs 20 minutes and everybody's up in arms. Why did they do that? And because that wasn't enough. It's not what they wanted. It's not enough things. I would hate for us to commit to this and then lose, like Ms. Bird said, early elementary stuff, which we have not touched, and to make that happen. It's just not feasible. I don't mind buying the software packet now, but I don't want to add money into the budget to as a placeholder.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to take a moment to thank Ms. Nally. We've needed to do something with this issue for a long time. At the end of the day, her motion says no high school starting before 7:45. It doesn't say starting at 7:45. It says no high school starting before 7:45. It also, her motion does not say a middle school ending at, elementary school ending at 4:20. Her motion says that no comprehensive elementary or middle school ends after 4:20. I highlight those because it still gives the administration plenty of room and opportunity to set the necessary limits inside of those hours, no earlier than 7:45 and no later than 4:20. And I believe that's prudent at the price. Is it perfect? Is it saying that our high schools are going to start at 8:30? No, it doesn't. I get that. But not in every case do you get everything you want in our conservative county. Yes, I've talked to many of you all on this issue. I believe in an ideal world. I went to school at 8:30. I got out at 3:45, 3:30, something like that. And in kindergarten, I took a nap. Now, I don't think we do that now. No. But I didn't want to take the nap then, and now today I would be blessed to have a nap. This is a very serious issue, but any of these options, none of these options are absolutely perfect, but we have got to move off of trying to make calls for snow and cold weather at 05:50 or whatever time it is, in order 04:50 or whatever time it is, and getting Bob Mosier's voice at my house at 5:15 in the morning. We have got to move off of that for the sake of the winter. And so, if this isn't it, I welcome something different. But what I will tell you is something needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. Not 2 years from now, not 3 years from now, and not 5 years from now. Something needs to be done now. And this is the first stab at it. Thank you.
Mr. Webb.
Just following up on Mr. Jackson's remarks, the 28 minutes does make a significant difference when it comes to making that call on an inclement weather day. It makes a significant difference. Also, 28 minutes makes a difference from a safety standpoint, too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Korbelak, but I believe you looked at sunrise times.
Yes, the latest sunrise during the school year is 7:25 a.m. and the earliest sunset is 4:54.
So what we're asking for is a corridor which keeps everyone in a safety zone of sunlight, not being out in the dark. I think that's very important to consider in this.
Mrs. Birch.
I was wondering if Dr. Arlotto could tell us what the administration is doing in terms of the transportation routing software that has been requested.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be glad to give you an update. And certainly, Mr. Sheknovich, if I leave anything out, please fill in the gaps. Mr. Sheknovich's team, which includes folks from transportation, budgeting, our contracting folks, as well as some input from county government. We have talked to vendors and we have talked to other LEAs that have recently gone through the process. And the drafting of the RFP for routing software is currently underway. So that team is working on building the RFP that we will then put out on the street. With the board's approval, we'll go through the two-step process of first taking in bids on paper. The team will go through that, and the county government has agreed to be part of that team, that review process. And then once the vendors have been narrowed down to an appropriate number to bring in for the actual interview and review process, we'll bring them in. So hopefully the RFP is ready to hit the streets and say within the month. And then we'll have a vendor chosen probably by late spring, let's say mid-May, we'll have a vendor chosen, and then we'd be ready to purchase. So we could purchase we'd be ready to purchase prior to the adoption of the budget if we know that the money is gonna be in our budget going forward.
Dr. Arlotto, piggybacking on that question, I know there was some talk about us piggybacking on a contract with another county. Can you speak to that option?
I understand that our purchasing folks made contact with a number of the LEAs. There were no open contracts right now that we could piggyback on. We were able to glean some information about what they learned through the process about vendors and questions and narrowing the scope of the work or enlarging the scope of the work, whatever is needed. But there were no contracts that we could join in on. Is that correct, Mr. Sheknovich?
Correct. None that fit the template of the requirements here in Anne Arundel County.
Mr. Jackson?
Yeah, I want to thank you both for really moving out on that. I asked that question, I don't know, maybe about a month ago or so, and I appreciate you all reaching out to other counties and seriously taking a look at what options were available for us. And if there were no options, maybe there was just some learning that could happen. It sounds like some of that did happen. So thank you.
Ms. Chaudhry.
Going back to what Mr. Webb said, maybe the extra 28 minutes will make the difference with the inclement weather. But the reason that we started this project originally was because we wanted it to make a difference for the students and to get healthier school start times. And I don't think that this Band-Aid solution, as you guys say, is going to be that it's going to help with the healthier school start times. It might help with the inclement weather. Maybe we will have better chances of having school on days when we're supposed to and days when we're not supposed to. Yeah, but I just feel like the 28 extra minutes isn't going to help in the long run, because the reason we started this was because this past August, the American Pediatrics Association came up with statistics that specifically said 8:30 is when they wanted schools to start, or 8 a.m. And if we pass this today, then we're just passing something that doesn't even go by their standards, really. And we're not really following through with it. We're just trying to kind of, I guess, put a Band-Aid on it, as you said, Ms. Burge. We're just trying to do something to make everyone happy, but in the end, it's not really going to do that much.
Mr. Jackson.
Well, let me ask this question, if you don't mind, then. Would a better recommendation be that we start no high school before 08 and that we end no elementary or middle school at 1600 or 4 p.m.? Would that be a better recommendation in order to get us to something closer to the American Pediatrics, and so that it doesn't appear to be a Band-Aid solution? Because to me, this isn't about, it's not about applying a Band-Aid. Sometimes you can't eat an entire Whopper. Sometimes, and I don't even eat them anymore, sometimes you can only take a bite out of crime because you can't solve all the crime in one particular county. So I admit to you, I'll be the first one to admit to anyone on this board, anyone in this room, or anybody on TV, that it's not perfect. But what we are trying to do is make sure that within the limits of the asking, being prudent askers, as has been said by many of us up here, what would satisfy the masses with respect to the times? Because it's not me trying to pacify anybody. It's me saying that we may not be able to eat everything all at once. And so we have to take baby steps in some cases in order to move us to where we need to go. And that may take some time, but it at least moves the needle in some direction that's positive for children.
Mrs. Birch.
I think that the problem with that is that it's going to get you back to probably close to your $9 million price tag, because you're not going to be able to run the same multiple bus runs anymore, because you're getting high schools into middle school times and middle schools into elementary school times. And basically you're giving the direction without an informed plan, which is what the routing software will allow us to do, to give us the informed plans. So you're basically saying, spend the money to get the results without knowing what we're doing. And I think the point of getting the routing software is to say, what are our options for how we can make something happen? So it's like putting the cart before the horse. And then to me, that doesn't make sense, to set some random parameters. I mean, whereas once you get the routing software, you can set a whole bunch of different parameters and say, okay, let's see what happens now. And what happens with this, and how much will it cost? And one thing I do want to point out that hasn't really been discussed, and I would like to ask your thoughts on it, Mr. Sheknovich. When we talk about how much it's going to cost additional for buses, when we go with, say, Plan A, where we were going to have to add a number of additional bus routes, and then those bus routes were only going to be running, those bus drivers would only be running 2 runs, each of them. I would anticipate as a school bus driver that I would not be very pleased that I would now only be doing 2 runs rather than 4, because I'm guessing that part of our calculation is not paying twice as much for each bus run. Is it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so are we going to be able to find enough bus drivers in this county to run that many bus runs? I mean, I've actually stayed up late at night worrying about this, that if we if we did this, would we find enough buses and bus drivers to do such a thing? Because it dawned on me at one point that all of a sudden their pay would get cut in half because they wouldn't have as many bus runs. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, even today we face a significant challenge here in Anne Arundel County, not just us Anne Arundel County schools, but our contractors as well, with attracting and retaining qualified bus drivers. So a bus driver of a school bus has to have a CDL license, as well as have to have additional endorsements, passenger endorsements, etc. So even today we scramble in the mornings sometimes to find enough permanent bus drivers. They are not paid very well. They are part-time jobs, as you know. And so there is a lot of expense and effort to go into getting the correct training, keeping up on your medical certifications, keeping up on your drug testing, etc. And you have to, as you said, you have to be able to work enough hours to make that all worth your while, make it worth the contractor's while, etc. So it would be a pretty large effort to increase the number of certified drivers that we have here in Anne Arundel County, A, so that's challenge A, and then B, finding enough that may be willing to go through those efforts to work less routes or less hours, et cetera, because most of these are not full-time. You know, they're paid essentially by the hour, and so the more hours they can work, you know, the more lucrative that run is. And they most contractors have sort of like a seniority-based system where they bid. It's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek word, but they almost bid on runs. And that's not to say everybody wants to run with the most hours in a day, but the run with the most hours in a day has the biggest paycheck, so they vie for those. Some folks, obviously due to their own individual circumstances, would prefer less hours in a day because maybe, you know, they have other things to tend to. But again, sort of just in summary, I'll say that today, with the amount of buses we have on the roads, the amount of runs that we have, it is a challenge today to have enough certificated licensed folks staff those buses each and every day. And we would have to work with the industry and the public at large to essentially get the word out, get them to begin those training classes in advance, to, you know, begin to plan to have those physicals, those drug tests, work with DMV to get their licenses through and the required training completed to have them lined up in time. But it's going to be quite an effort, and we're going to need a lot of help beyond just the school district to get there.
Mrs. Ritchie.
One of the things that we were, you know, that concerns me is that the county council is only going to be given a certain amount of money, and as far as I know, they're not allowed to add money. They can only move money, and they can move money from fire department and put it in the school system, or from the police department to the fire department and things like that. And they can move money within our own state categories and allocate those in certain places, and we'd have to ask permission to then move that money if we wanted to. So one concern is that if we say this is what we want, and the campaign that the school start time people have done is excellent. I mean, you've done an excellent job of gaining the people, of advocating for your position, and I don't have any issue with that. The issue I have is that whoever yells the loudest and is most persistent is the one who wins, and in anything. And that's not a derogatory thing. That's a positive thing, because that's what we want, people to advocate for what they want. So the problem is that if we put this $1 million placeholder, if you will, in there, is that then the county council decides they're going to move money in our budget, taking away the authority of the superintendent to make educational decisions that we need to make within our county. Number one being that we've really started looking at, we want to increase the Triple E programs that we have in our schools, because that's proven to work in North County. The teachers are loving it, the students are loving it, and it's effective and it's working. And so now what happens if they decide they're going to move money from that and put it to over here? That has taken away our ability to meet the mandates that we need to meet and to reach the goals that we as a community as a whole have said we want. The whole purpose of this routing software, and what I've heard numerous times, is to see where we can make cost savings, to look at potential runs, because I mean we may get this and they may be able to reconfigure us so that we can do some of these things and to run scenarios. That was the whole purpose of trying to get that beforehand. So if we say, well, no, we're going to do this and we haven't even gotten the software, I think, Ms. Bird, you said putting the cart before the horse. That was completely right out of my mouth. That's absolutely true. We need to run the software scenarios. We need to look at what's going on, and we need to do it right and not do one little piece at a time that's going to then say, no, we didn't want it to be at 7:47. We want it to really be at 8:30 or 8 o'clock or 8:15 or whatever. I'm just concerned that if we put that money there, I mean, it doesn't stop the county council from doing what they want to do in the first place, but the fact of the matter is that they then take away our ability to manage our system.
Mr. Webb.
What I've been hearing is a lot of speculation. The only research I've heard is from Ms. Chaudhry, actually. I think we've all been speculating a little too much on this. What Mr. Jackson and Ms. Nally have said is just setting a limit, upper limit and lower limit, and we would have to do that anyway for any company that we contracted with. They need to know what our upper limit is and our lower limit. I see no problem with that, and everything I've read is that the county council is in favor of moving start times. So why continue to kick this can down the road? If they have the software in-house in the time frame that Dr. Arlotto has discussed, then we will be able to see what what it looks like, what we can do once they chart everything out within the constraints that we give them, upper limit and lower limit. So I don't see a problem with moving forward with this as a placeholder.
Ms. Chaudhry.
You mentioned that there were going to be the constraints, but maybe 7:45, like I mentioned before, it doesn't meet the APA's. It doesn't meet the American Pediatrics constraints.
From a safety standpoint, when I talk about 7:45 as a lower limit, I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint when I talk about 7:45 as a lower limit. If we can't meet the Academy of Pediatrics requirements, we still need to be cognizant of what's safest for our students.
Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. As some other testimony and comments and questions was asked with regards to transportation and bus drivers, our children don't exist for the bus drivers and the busing system. Okay? The bus drivers and the buses exist for our children. We have, for a very long time, allowed our transportation system to drive, and I want to be as efficient as I can be in getting my children to school. Brady gets picked up. He only gets picked up. We were having the conversation last night with my wife. You mean the bus isn't going to get picked up going to school? No, honey, because Mr. Shaknovich has got it all figured out where he only gets picked up going away from his school. And then he's going to go down to another place because I live on a certain side of the road. The bus is going to turn around, and it's going to then go past my house a second time and then go up to the school. There's a reason why you do that, and I applaud that efficiency. But we've got to move from our children existing, of our children not existing for the bus drivers, because they don't. It reminds me of the old movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If we create an infrastructure where we need bus drivers in order to support our children's needs to get them to and from school, then our industry, I have full faith and belief, our industry will respond. They haven't failed us for, I don't know, however long Anne Arundel County Public Schools has been going to school. And I don't believe that they'll fail us now. So, if 745 is not what we need and 8 is what we need as far as a lower limit, then I'm fine with it. I'll tell you what my recommendation originally was, and I've got it written here. I sent it to Mr. Mosier last night after he asked us a second time from this past week. I had add $6 million in the state category of transportation to support half-year implementation of adjusting school hours to support later school start times. So if folks don't like Ms. Nally's $1.3 million motion, I don't know what that number is, but I venture to say Ms. Burge is probably right. The number is probably going to go from 1.3 up to something, she said, 8, 9 million, what was in option A, or so forth. So we don't know what that number is, but we will say that we believe our analysts are some of the most efficient analysts at figuring out what the bus route should be, and we don't think there's a whole lot of savings in that. So if we believe that, stick in $6 million. It's only a placeholder until we run some of the scenarios after we get some of the software. But at the end of the day, we cannot continue to do what we're doing to our children today in high school, and it doesn't just impact high school, it also impacts the other middle and elementary schools. So again, I give you what my recommendation is on top of what Ms. Nally, if you don't like Ms. Nally's, but we've got to come up with something.
Mrs. Burge.
First of all, I disagree that we're building our system around the bus drivers. I'm just pointing out, because I do believe that there's a supply and demand for our workers in this county, and if it's not an attractive job, which I think that this is making it, you need to work harder to get the people, and you can't do it real fast. They do need a lot of training. I don't know if you've ever sat for a CDL test. I used to work at the MVA. It's hard. It is not an easy thing to do. And if there is not a lot of reward attached to it, why would you do it? They're not going to do it just because, oh, the kids need to get to school. So you may say to your son, look, the bus is going to come, but there's a possibility that the bus isn't going to come because there's not going to be anybody to drive it. So it's something to consider. It's just one of the many, many factors that we need to consider. We're the board, and we can't just consider one factor. The public is lucky. They get to consider just one factor. They get to say, and that's your job, later school start times are the healthy choice. You should do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's your job, and that's what you get to do. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury because I've been told before you can't put a price tag on our children's health and education. But I'll say it again. There is a price tag. And I told you earlier, I have a price tag on a whole bunch of other things that I would really love to do. I had $18.5 million of other things that are research-based that would be excellent to do for our children's education. They're really great things. Putting enough teachers in the classroom. Don't tell me that's a bad thing, because I know that's a good thing, and I know it would help every one of our children. It's an excellent thing to do. But I can't pay for everything. And like Ms. Ritchie said, we need to make the decisions about what's going to make the most impact for our children here at the board level. Our superintendent has said, I would like to run this software for a year and figure out, since we've been told this is a priority, what's the best way to do it. I don't want to do it haphazardly. I think that's the best way to go. I'm supporting my superintendent. I'll be voting against this amendment. I'll be voting against any other amendments.
Ms. Chaudhry.
I agree. The reason I had Mr. Webb say that to me was because he's looking at it from a completely safety standpoint. He doesn't want kids out there in the dark. And the reason we were originally looking at this was because we want safer school start times. And that's why I feel like I'm not against school start times. I support them, but we have to do it the correct way, which is looking at all the information. And Dr. Alato, that's what he wants to do. He wants to get the transportation software, which we're gonna get, and we're gonna have all the information once we have that, and we're gonna be able to make a better solution than what I think is proposed here. So that's why I'm gonna go against this amendment and any other amendment we make today, because if we just make another amendment today, 8 o'clock, to meet the APA, American Pediatrics Association requirements, and setting that as the standard, I feel like we're gonna be making this decision very hastily. We're going to be making it quickly, and it's just going to be a band-aid solution. And we don't want to look back and say maybe we should have took more time and made our decision more carefully. So I'm going to be voting against all the amendments, and I'll be supporting the superintendent as well.
Mr. Webb.
Again, there's a lot of speculation going on up here. I don't really see where there's a conflict in what we're discussing. We can appropriate the software. We can run the scenarios. It's within the time frame where Ms. Manali has said for the 2016 school year. So we should know the results prior to the 2016 school year. Additionally, if I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint, that's part of keeping kids healthy, having them in a safe environment, and that's one of our prerogatives, a safe and secure environment for our children. One thing we know for sure, the sun is up by 7:45, and it doesn't go down before 5:45 or 4:45. So those are our limits, pure and simple, if we want to keep our kids in a safety zone as far as catching the bus to come to school and catching the bus to leave school. I see no problem with setting those parameters now. You may have some issues with how much money we're setting aside, but I see no problem with setting the parameters now. The superintendent can move forward knowing what parameters we've set.
Mrs. Burge.
Well, except the amendment doesn't say the 2016-17. It says no later than, and it asks for money in this year. So that means that it could happen this year, and I think this year is too soon because I don't think we've done our work yet. So that's the problem. Thank you.
It could, but would it? Let's not speculate.
I would just like to talk to this amendment briefly. And first of all, I'd like to start by saying that I don't have a dog in this fight. My daughter will have graduated from Anne Arundel County Public Schools before we would ever implement later start times in the 2016-17 school year. But I do, and I have made note that the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils voted on December 3rd, 2014. 60% of the students wanted us to adopt one of the 4 options presented by the task force. We also had a stakeholder survey online with 1,593 responses, and 59% wanted one of the 4 options, and another 8% wanted us to explore yet additional options. Only 33% did not want any change. We also have the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene that has asked us to consider this. We have the American Academy of Pediatrics that has asked us to consider this. We have the County Council that has asked us to consider this. We had our county executive express his support for later start times during his campaign. We've spoken with Recreation and Parks about adjusting before school care to make sure that if a motion like this were to pass, that our students could still have adequate before school care. I think what Mrs. Nally's motion is doing is exactly kind of protecting us from exactly what Mr. Sheknovus and Mrs. Burge are concerned about. If we don't have money in the FY16 budget to purchase and contract for buses, say in May or June of 2016, we aren't going to be able to start this in August of 2016. So we'd be looking at second semester 2017 or the 2017-18 school year if we don't have any money allocated as a placeholder to make some contracting decisions and purchases for buses toward the end of this coming fiscal year. I've spoken with Dr. Arlato. He believes if we're able to purchase the software in the spring, late spring of this year, it's possible that the routing software could bring other scenarios to the board, options E, F, G, and H, to this board by the end of this calendar year. We could sit here next February and offer amendments to his operating budget in order to do what we need to do. But if we don't put anything in here as a placeholder, in my opinion, and my analysis, we weren't going to be able to do anything about start times until 2017. And that's not acceptable to me. We do have a timeline established, and this motion allows us to stay within that timeline. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, Ms. Korbelak, I appreciate you laying out all of those facts relative to folks' opinions as well as other organizations that have asked us to take up this issue. Bottom line is this issue is not going away. It is not going away, and the sooner we address this issue, we can move on to other items, important items as well that this board has to consider. The issue is not going away. And so today, the vote may end up being on Ms. Nally's motion 4-3, and we won't get to 5. But there are 2 empty seats on this board that will be filled momentarily. And there will be 2 other individuals going through the process again. And so folks have an opportunity to shape this board. Thank you.
Mrs. Nally.
I want to make note that this amendment provides funding for 10 additional buses to transport non-public students and 13 additional buses to transport students to accommodate the parameters of the school day detailed in the motion, a 28-minute shift in all comprehensive high schools so they start at no later than 7:45, no earlier, excuse me, 28-minute shift in all other schools except Hebron Harmon Elementary and Evening High School campuses. A to be determined shift so that Hebron Harmon ends at or before 4:20. And a to be determined shift for Evening High School campuses to accommodate staffing and transportation needs. Start times at all schools will be finalized and effective no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year.
Mrs. Ritchie.
How much would 5 buses cost?
The average cost of a contracted bus route is $60,224. So it'd be that times 5. Yeah,
Really?
we're both gonna have to break out our abacus. So
The question is that one of the comments by Ms. Korbelak was that we want to be able to have the money to be able to purchase the buses. The contract for the bus, so that the bus companies would then go out and purchase the bus, So but that doesn't take into account all the that's just for a bus, $60,000.
no, that's the average cost of running a bus for a year, which
Okay.
includes the capitalization cost of the bus, plus the fuel, plus the driver. When a company buys a bus per state of Maryland regulations has a useful life of 12 years. So they're buying the bus on the front side and then hoping that across the 12-year time span, they recover the costs of that bus, plus are able to cover the maintenance, the labor cost, the fuel costs. And since they are for profit private companies, they would hope to possibly turn a
Right.
profit at the end of the day as well.
That's what businesses do. The question is, if I heard Ms. Korbelak correctly, one of the reasons, the rationales for putting this motion forward was so that we are able to then be able to go out and purchase the buses, to be able to put the orders in, to be able to say that we're looking towards that and so forth. Because, which is a lot less of a number, 60,000 times 5, is that what you said? That's what, 300, what did you say it was, 360,000? $300,000 as opposed to $1 million. And so I would be more apt to put in that as opposed to all this other piece, because we haven't run any scenarios. We don't know how much it's going to cost to run that. And the fact is if we're looking at, being able to put a monetary amount in there to be able to get buses, but and I don't want to amend this motion to do that. The other issue is that I fully understand that if not now, when. But the other part of it is that we haven't run the scenarios. We don't know what the impact is going to be. And I'm not willing to take the chance that other things won't be cut from our budget or moved from our budget to satisfy this one piece, because the fact is we have to make tough decisions, and I'm not willing to do that. I'm willing to maybe give $300,000 as a placeholder to get 5 buses, but I'm not willing to go for $1 million.
I think we know from the motion that we need at least 10 buses just to transport our non-public students if we make any kind of shift. I'm not sure what 5 would get us. 13 addresses the Hebron harm and the fact that they're our latest starting elementary. Ms. Chaudhry.
I would just like to clarify something that Ms. Korbelak said. She said that CRASC, which is a Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils, voted 40 for not having any change in school start times, and 60 voted for having change in school start times. But those 60% that did vote on changing the school start times, they did not vote on this amendment right here. They voted on the other amendments or the other options. So this wasn't presented to them. And if we're looking at it from a student viewpoint, I don't know how many of them would support it. I think you would have a lot more that would probably not support it if you already had 40% that weren't going to support it anyway. So I don't think, if we're looking at what the students want, I don't think this is something that they would support. So that's also why I'm not going to support it.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that 60% of our students wanted some sort of change. We don't know yet what the change will look like. We're just trying to put a placeholder to start the procurement process. Mrs. Birch.
I actually have a question. Why does a change in AACPS school times require funding for buses to transport non-public school students? Because don't they not go to our schools?
No, ma'am. Anne Arundel County Public Schools transports, this could be the Maryland School for the Blind, Hannah More School. We have students that go to a lot of non-public school settings that are not run within our buildings. We transport those children back and forth.
Right. But so we're already transporting, so why do we need more buses for them if they're already going to those schools?
Because those buses are also doing other things for us. So if when those
it's not about the non-public students. It's not. I mean, it says to transport non-public students. It's for our own.
And 13 additional to transport the regulars.
So it's more about the students who are staying, the public school students who require those buses. It's not about the.
602 of the motion that's before you, $602,240 is associated with the non-public shift. The balance is associated with other buses servicing our existing complement of schools.
Okay, and those would be the contracts. The 13 would be the contracts.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We contract out non-public transportation as well. We don't
okay, so all of those are about the special education students then?
We transport the vast majority of our special education students that require adaptive busing,
right.
So lift assist buses. Many of our non-public students do not require that type of bus. They can be transported suitably on a conventional bus. So this is not for the lift assist buses. This is for a conventional transportation style bus. The cost for a lift assist bus would be significantly more than the numbers presented here. We don't not contemplate having to add additional lift assist buses to the AACPS fleet. This would be all handled externally through contracted opportunities.
Okay, so all 23 of these are contractual?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so again, tell me, why would you need the money the year before in order to do the contracts?
We bid the contracts out over the course of the wintertime. Most of the manufacturers have to place their orders for buses probably no later than February if they even hope to get the buses fabricated and through the DMV inspection and license and tag process to get them in time for August. So you would, as Ms. Korbelak indicated earlier, you would actually have to have money in the 15 budget to provide essentially the assurances to the industry that go ahead, we would bid the service, but ultimately they would need to have time to put the chassis and the engine orders into the assembly line process. They would need to begin that recruitment and training and driver DMV certification process. That's why I said the industry needs time to, prepare for this, just like we need time to prepare for this.
But you're not spending it in that year.
We are not spending it in that year. Correct.
So, Mr. Shekhnevich, would we just roll that? We would have the money in the account if the motion like this passed. They could go ahead and place their orders, hire and train their drivers. We would roll it over to July 1 and cut the check then? Is that how it would work?
Essentially, it would fall to fund balance, but it will be used to pay the cost in that following year.
Okay. Mrs. Ritchie.
So basically we need money for buses, not for scenarios, but money for buses, because we don't know what the scenarios look like. It may look like this. It may look like something different. We may need it for public education. We may, not non-public education, transporting the kids to, like it said, to Maryland School for the Blind and so forth, and we may not. So really what we need is money for buses, to have something in there should we decide that once we get the software we're going to run and we're going to need 7 buses to be able to make, just pick a number. Those kind of different scenarios. Would that be fair to say we need money for buses? Because this million includes more than just buses.
It's the...
Oh, just the buses, because... 13. Okay, I missed the 13 down there. Okay. Well,
no. The way the calculation was arrived at for the 23 buses was looking at the sunrise and sunset times to try to make sure the students were, our latest elementary school, Harbin, would still get on the bus, and they were the outlier. So we needed to procure 13 buses for them to make sure that they were back on the bus and home before 4:54. That's how we derived the 23 buses. Mrs. Ritchie.
When this task force met, did they run any scenarios in terms of the change in the traffic pattern? I know that if I leave my house 10 minutes later, it throws me completely off because the amount of traffic. I'm amazed that sometimes I leave, there's like no traffic on the road, and then I realize I left earlier. And if I leave at a different time. So when this task force met, did they run any scenarios, or did they have the ability to run any scenarios about rush hour and about different things like that? Because we keep saying that these kids aren't going to get home before the sun sets, but the fact of the matter is they may. We don't know.
My understanding, Ms. Ritchie, is many of those things were talked about. Now, did they were all of the possible options run for then a costing out? No, but looking at traffic patterns on Mountain Road and in certain parts of the county where if you start to change a pickup time of 4 o'clock versus 4:30 or 4:15 versus 4:45, part of that was the discussion over the 7-month period that the task force looked at.
Discussion meaning they said this is a problem, or a discussion in that we looked at what the traffic looked like? Okay.
When their buses have to be off the roads when the traffic gets increases.
Okay.
I don't have any further board comments, but I have at least one card, Lisa Miller, and anyone else who might like to comment on this particular amendment.
Hi, how are you? I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I was taking notes as I was listening.
Could you state your name for the record?
I'm sorry, my name is Lisa Miller. I live in Edgewater. I have an elementary student and a South River High School student. The transportation routing software needs to be purchased immediately to help solve the problem with start times and to get the best possible solution. I could see benefits of a 28-minute time change, though it still has high schoolers walking to their bus stops in the dark. While our goal is not to please the bus drivers, they'd probably be happier, with the later start time also. I don't know what time a bus driver has to leave their house to get to the bus at that lot to warm it up and make sure it's ready at their first bus stop. But I think that we have to keep in mind that this is an investment, and we'll see rewards for years on end by making this change and making it a healthier start time for our students. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Melissa Stanton. I live in Davidsonville. I have a child at South River High School and a daughter at Central Middle. I just wanted to say lots of talk today. There's been lots of talk about closing the achievement gap, and that's great and that's essential. But our high school start times for many kids is causing an achievement gap. I know that's been happening for my son, who's been on a decline since he started high school, from having done very well at Davidsonville Elementary and Central Middle School. For some kids, at the very least, the school start times are getting in the way of closing the achievement gap. So either causing it or getting in the way of closing it. And I know that closing it is really important to the school system. There's been lots of talk about budget challenges. But as many experts, parents, doctors, and teachers have testified to this board and to other groups, Anne Arundel County Public Schools is wasting money by starting high school at 7:17 a.m. Kids aren't showing up. Those who are in a fog and aren't learning. So the status quo isn't working. You all know that. It's time to start school later and figure out a way to do it, either with the funds you have or with the help of the Anne Arundel County County Council, which recently unanimously supported starting school later and buying the transportation software this year and getting this done soon. So whatever you guys can figure out to get done, ideally for next school year, if not, with Miss Lally for the following school year. But, you've had 20 years. Just something needs to be done, even if it's a little bit, but better than Montgomery County, ideally. Thank you.
Tom, are you next?
My name is Tom Frank, and I've listened to the discussion that you've had, and I'm concerned that of all the comments that have been made, we've perhaps wandered off the path a little bit. And please correct me if I'm wrong. As I understand it, the subject on the table right now is the school budget, and we're talking about whether or not to spend money for a piece of software that we can later use to determine whether or not we should start school later. That software certainly is relatively inexpensive compared to a budget that I like to describe as $1,000 million budget. So whether or not we spend that money on this is quite trivial. But what I think is the most important subject matter here in terms of whether or not we should consider starting school later is academic achievement. Actually, isn't that the most important subject that we're always talking about? Isn't academic achievement what drives the budget? And as a result of that, there have been a number of academic studies that have strongly suggested in so-called peer review literature, and I am a scientist and I read and respect peer review literature, and I would hope that you would read it and make a determination on the facts, not on opinions, and not whether or not we should have bus drivers start at a particular time. So I'm hoping that you will come up with the money so that we can purchase a piece of software. But first of all, let's make an academic decision about whether we should start school later, and if so, when. And I believe there is universal opinion that starting at 7:17 in the morning is one of the earliest start times in the United States, and everyone agrees it's way too early.
Thank you.
I'm Kari Oakes with a frog in my throat, sorry. I live in Annapolis. And the first thing I want to say is thank you to all of you, even the people who I think are going to be on the other side of the fence from us, because in meeting with each of you individually, I will say that I really got a strong sense of how much you care about the students in this county, how hard you work, and how strongly you feel this notion of competing interests. And I left those meetings encouraged in one sense, but sad in another. And I was sad because I'm really afraid that we're coming from a point of view of feeling scarcity and feeling as though you don't have the resources behind you that you do. Because Ms. Burge, one thing I want to tell you is that we are not just single issue parents. All of us who are here are members of the community, the hairdressers, the pediatricians, the nurses, the grandmas, the grandpas, the moms of preschoolers who care enough about this issue to put in time, also go to church, also shovel neighbors' driveways, also volunteer in their schools, advocate for English language learners in their schools. And so we're part of this community. And so I appreciate the honest dialogue that I've been able to have with all of you, even some of you who don't agree with what's on the table today. So that's the first thing, and that took up a lot of time, but I thought it was important to say, so I wanted to be able to say it to all of you face to face. The second thing I want to say, Ms. Chaudhry, is that 28 minutes will make a difference, and we know this because of science. And I know you're a future scientist and currently excelling in a STEM program. So we know that even 20 minutes of change makes a difference in student mood, in student mental and physical health, and in student achievement. And so it might not be enough, but it's enough to make a difference. So it's something we should think about. The third thing I want to say is that we're not going at breakneck pace here. There are people in this room that have been at this for way, way, way longer than I have. Task Force has finished its work in August of 2013. Strong work. Dr. McMahon worked really hard on it. We have everything in place. In 2007 and again in 2013, the Office of Legislative Audits cited this group for not having the transportation routing software that now we're in a big hurry to buy. We can't change where we are now, but that's something that could have been remediated earlier, and there's no reason not to move quickly. The last thing I want to say is we're here with you. I just have a few seconds. We will go with you. We will advocate for early education. We will advocate for English language learners. We don't want to do this on the backs of elementary parents because that's us. That's who we are. We're all part of a community. We want to do this together. Let's find a way to find a compromise and do what we know has to be done. And thank you again very much.
Hi, I'm Tara Zavorin Snyder, and some of you know me all too well. I am a former AACPS parent. Two of my daughters were the student members of the board, and the third one is now a college sophomore, so this issue is over for me, but I keep coming back. I keep swearing I won't, but I do because I care so deeply about it. I care about education in general, and I really care about health and safety because I'm a medical writer by profession and a medical historian. And I've been looking at this issue not just from AACPS's perspective, but from the perspective of the entire nation. I now lead Start School Later, which is a national nonprofit, and I spent last week going around to the House and Senate office buildings talking to legislators on a national level. There will be national legislation introduced in March about this issue. There will be state legislation introduced. This is, as Mr. Jackson said, this will keep coming back. So the reason I'm talking is, first of all, it's hard to follow on Kari, but I really do want to thank you, Ms. Nally, for introducing this. And I wanted to thank all of you for taking this seriously because it really is a serious issue. Ms. Chaudhry may not know this because she was 3 years old when this happened, but when I first moved to this county, Dr. Carol Sheffy Parham, who this building is named after, was trying to get this change to happen back then. There was going to be a pilot program at Annapolis High starting in 2001, and it was based on the science that we're still talking about today, except it's stronger. So when you talk about we're moving too fast, I can't understand that because, simply saying that a current plan isn't perfect is no reason not to make a small improvement. You have the opportunity to do that right now. I've been looking at schools all over the country who have done this, and the ones who do it successfully always start by making a goal, just as this amendment is, by saying this is what we'd like to achieve. Yes, Ms. Burge, there are serious problems that people might have with the change. These need to be taken into account. We need to work with the community. The communities that have resolved this successfully have made a commitment to doing it because they know it's important, and then they work with people to find a way to do it. The software will help us find ways to do it efficiently. It can. Numbers have come down astronomically in Fairfax County, for example, when they use software to find efficient ways to run buses. They worked with teachers. They worked with parents. They worked with students who were concerned about their after-school jobs and whether they'd get their homework done. And they found ways to do it. And we don't need to speculate because we've seen that these fears can be resolved. But number one, we must commit to doing it, and you have the chance to do that today. I really hope you will. I don't want to keep talking to you about this, but I do appreciate that you're taking it seriously, and thank you.
Thank you all. Is there anyone else who would like to speak toward this amendment? Mr. Jackson.
Yes, I just want to make mention to Ms. Schneider that, I took some time and I actually work in Crystal City anyway, but I drove over to the Fairfax County Board of Education on the day they were having the meeting when they were going through their blueprint for change. And that is a powerful example that took a long time for their community to move through the issue, but they have made change, better change for children. Thanks.
And Mr. Frank, I also wanted to just mention that as an academic, I read peer-reviewed publications as well, and I do have the one from the American Academy of Pediatrics with me, and you're absolutely right. It says adolescents who get enough sleep have a reduced risk of being overweight or suffering depression, are less likely to be involved in automobile accidents, and have better grades, higher standardized test scores, and an overall better quality of life.
Thank you for mentioning that, and I hope you'll provide a copy of that to other board members. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Burge?
Can you clarify for him, though, he was mistaken as to what we're actually debating?
Correct. We were not, Mr. Frank, we were not debating whether or not to buy software because that's already a part of Dr. Arlotto's budget. This was strictly for the money for additional buses. Mrs. Ritchie?
And I just want to be clear, it's not that I don't believe this needs to occur. It does need to occur. We do need to look at this. But I also don't want to do one of those things where we get locked into this is the way we're supposed to do it and that's the only way we can do it. And that happened I'm not basing that on just my supposition. I've seen it happen time and time again. And so as a matter of fact, I was around Ms. Snyder, sitting out there with you in the audience many times when they had that discussion, and all I kept thinking was, thank God it's not me. So, karma has a way of getting you. But the fact is that because there was nobody, they didn't sit down and do it in a methodical way, they got to a point where 50% said yes, 50% said no, so the board said no. And that was the end of it and moved on. We have a plan. Everybody keeps saying, if you have a plan, we have a plan. This is a part of it, but the plan is to get the software, to look at the scenarios, to start looking at that, and to start really methodically figuring out what works best for our kids and what works best for all kids. When we're talking about health and safety, we're talking a multitude of issues. We added a psychologist. That's health and safety. It's not a matter of one against the other. It's about how do we make it happen in a way that's going to occur. We've been told we're not getting more maintenance of effort. Why we're making these amendments, and they're going to crunch all our numbers and tell us how much more over we are. That's going to happen. My fear, again, proven fear, because it's happened before, is that the county council will then take a chunk of money that we have asked for a specific thing here and move it over here. And that then pits one against the other. You all have done an excellent job, and I hope you continue to do an excellent job. And when the emails come, maybe now they also need to start influencing about how early education is important, because when I read the emails that I'm getting, basically what they're saying is, if we don't do this, then we don't care about kids. And I have to tell you that's not true, because if I didn't care about kids, I'd be sitting on my couch, not here.
Okay, I don't have any more lights, and we don't have any more public comments. So we have a motion on the floor that's been properly made and seconded to add $1,385,152 allocated in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours to ensure that no school starts before 7:45 and no comprehensive elementary or middle ends after 4:20. And that the hours be adjusted accordingly and become effective no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion fails 4-3. Mrs. Nally?
I would like to proffer another amendment. I move that the board add $600,000 in appropriate state categories to shift current school hours to ensure that no high school starts before 7:45 and no comprehensive elementary and middle after 4:20. I further move that school hours be accordingly become effective no later than the start of the 2016-17. This would reduce the bus request from the 10 additional and 13 to just 10 buses.
Second.
Mrs. Birch.
Thank you. I have a problem with us saying what the times are, because I don't know that those are the best times. I think that 4:20 is too late. I think that I could be comfortable with us putting in some money to make sure that we have money to do some bidding, but I am not comfortable with us deciding right now that 4:20 is a reasonable time for elementary schools and middle schools, and I will not vote for anything that says that 4:20 is a reasonable time for any child in this county to get out of school.
Can we offer an amendment to that then? I have Mrs. Ritchie's light on too.
And I fully agree. I'm willing to, with much constraint, I'm willing to vote for $600,000 to put the money in for placeholder, but I'm not willing to vote for times. And the reason I'm not willing to vote for times is because as soon as we put it out there, that becomes it. And if we say that we're going to go to 4:30, or if we say we're only going to go to 4:10 or whatever, it becomes it. And I'm not willing to do that. I'm willing to put $600,000 for us to be able to have a secure place for buses to be able to meet the needs of starting school later, but I'm not willing to put in times. So therefore, I move to amend the motion that was made that deletes anything after $600,000 in terms of start times.
Could I just ask for a clarification from Alex? Is it 602,240? Would that be the exact amount for 10 buses?
Yes.
Okay, can we 602,240?
There we go.
So the motion would now say that you're moving, that the board add $602,240 in the appropriate state categories to what? To shift school hours?
Yes.
But no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year?
Yeah.
Is that what it will say? Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Well, I think you answered my question. The key for me is to make sure we get in no later than the start of the 2016-2017 school year, because I don't want it unended. If we're going to get rid of time specific, then I just want to make sure that language is there, because the whole focus of us doing it now is so that we can impact the immediate future budget cycle. Thank you.
Dr. Arlato.
Thank you. With this latest amendment of adding a little over $600,000, we know from the work of the task force that will enable the school system to move start times a half an hour at beginning and ending for all schools. But it will not accommodate some of the shifts that are required, or parameters that I'm hearing as the discussion has been going on for some time now. So it will not, it is just as we shift times, it will help us purchase the routes to get kids to non-public placements, but we'll still leave, for example, Hebron Harmon getting out as it's our latest ending school now at 3:55, and so it would be moving at best a half an hour, or at least a half an hour, and it would not accommodate the additional buses that we went through in the previous amendment of adding another 13 buses to accommodate that. So I've heard some strong parameters that some of the board members want, which I absolutely can appreciate, but understand putting a placeholder of $600,000 is not then, a year from now, going to accommodate the shifts that I think everybody is looking for. It's going to be considerably more than that, and I want that to be part of the consideration as you move forward.
Mrs. Nally.
When you say just a simple shift is what we had discussed before, meaning all schools would move up by 30 minutes, it would mean all schools. So when Mrs. Bird speaks to 420 being too late, does this mean that some schools could go beyond that 420 if we do a simple shift?
Yes, ma'am, and that was what was one of the proposals.
I would never support any elementary school, any motion that would even on the outlier suggest that any elementary school should be out past 420. I think 420 is too late. That was as late as that. The hope I had was that the software would enable us to work with that and move them up. Absolutely not.
And certainly, you're right, it may, right? And as Ms. Korbelak stated earlier, we've got options A, B, C, and D from the great work of the 7 months of the task force. And it certainly may contribute with the new software. We might learn more from it, right? We want to be data-oriented. We want to learn what we can from the new software. And it might give us options E, F, G, and H. We don't know that. But if you're talking about a single placeholder of a little over $600,000, that will get you the non-public transportation needed, because now we're going to have to do single runs out to the non-public, so we have to buy those routes at $60,000 a piece. So if we want to then, that's the starting place. So as we look to shift times, we start, a base is $600,000 because of the non-public transportation, which is absolutely right and appropriate. And then we'll have to build from there on any other parameters the board so chooses to set, which is, again, fine, but I want the board to be considering that the $600,000 is a base.
And our latest school being Hebron Harmon at 355, other than our special schools, our comprehensive schools, then in order to stay within Mrs. Nally's 420, the largest shift we could make would be, what, 25 minutes? And, well, 602,000 would allow us to shift schools even 10 or 15 or 20 or 25.
Correct.
30 is...
Correct.
30 pushes it back further than Mrs. Nally would like, but a 20-minute or 25-minute shift would still keep Hebron Harmon ending by 420.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Ritchie?
I understand about that, because I don't really want them to get out past 4 o'clock. Because when we're talking about daylight, we're talking about traffic, we're talking about those kind of things. I really don't want them to get out past 4 o'clock. And the fact is that we don't know what the software is going to run. Not only that, there's nothing to stop us from saying and implementing increments of the way we do stuff. There's nothing that says that next year we don't say we're going to shift everything 15 minutes. But with the plan to look further and to be able to purchase more, because, to be quite honest, I don't know where we're going to get $1 million to be able to do this. While the county council says and made a nice little resolution, the fact of the matter is, if the money's not there, the money's not there. So you got nothing. So, that's one thing. There's no reason that we can't do this in a tiered way. So, I mean, we're saying we have to do it all or nothing. Well, what says that we can't go 15 minutes this year with the look towards going another 15 minutes, another 15, to get us to the place we want to be? I don't know. I'm more willing to vote for $600,000 as a placeholder for buses to be able to do stuff now, as opposed to looking for $1 million taken out of early education. I'm not willing to do $1 million. I mean, I voted that way. I don't really want to do this either, but in light of the fact that, we can ask for something, I'd rather ask for this than ask for nothing. And that doesn't stop us from doing something later on.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this motion? Or as amended? I need Tyson to keep me straight for parliamentary procedures today.
Madam President, Tyson Bennett, Board Counsel, for purposes of people looking back on this discussion, I just wanted to remind the board that I think Mr. Jackson made a second to Ms. Ritchie's motion to amend.
Yes.
But that was never acknowledged. So,
Okay.
I mean, it was just a voice saying, and I moved a second. And the second thing is that the discussion right now can only be on that motion to amend, not on the original motion that was made.
Okay, so the motion to amend that Ms. Ritchie made and Mr. Jackson seconded is, if I have it correct, a motion to add $602,240 allocated in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year. Is that right?
Well, it's to change the original amendment to the correct amount of money and to remove the times from the motion.
And I think that needs to be confirmed with the maker of the motion, who was Ms. Ritchie. Thank you.
Okay. So we have no further board. Well, we have Mrs. Burge now.
Oh, sorry, that was me.
All right, no further board lights. How about any public comment? So the motion on the table is to add $602,240 in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours. What?
Just to make those two changes to the original motion.
Okay. To make the changes to the original motion. All those in favor?
We have to vote on making your changes
Before we can vote on the motion.
Okay, my motion was to remove those pieces. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so the motion to make the corrections to the original motion. All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Now we can vote on Mrs. Ritchie's motion. Ms.
Nally's motion.
As amended. Okay. Yeah, I'll read it again. The motion as amended says that the board will add $602,240 allocated in the appropriate state categories to shift current school hours no later than the start of the 2016-17 school year. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Did you abstain or you raise your hand? Okay, so the motion passes 6-0-1. One abstention. I don't believe we have any additional motions for the budget. You all need time to calculate the grand total that we would be voting on. So we'll allow you to do that, and we'll just keep moving through the... Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson has two more motions, he said.
I'm sorry, these motions have to do with the capital budget and everything. For the most part, the other items we've somewhat talked about. So I'll skip those. But for the capital budget, I'd like to make a motion that we add funding for a second story design and build to the already addition in design for Eastport Elementary School and the appropriate capital project. And I'll be doing a separate one, but also for Georgetown East. And the point of those two motions are to help us address the issues relative to overcrowding in Tyler Heights and the redistricting that we're going to be going through of that entire Annapolis and Eastport area.
Madam President,
Yes.
I think those are going to be two separate motions. if I'm understanding Mr. Jackson
One for
correctly.
Eastport and one for Georgetown East.
And each will need to be seconded and discussed and voted on independently.
So your first motion is for Eastport, Mr. Jackson?
Correct.
Okay. And Ms. Ritchie seconded. Do you have a dollar amount or?
The dollar amount was already provided. Mr. Shagnovich provided it in literature to the board. Do you remember what that number was? I don't off the top of my head.
For Eastport?
Yes.
You would have, the current project cost is $3,653,000. You would be adding $3 million. So the total price would now be $6,653,000 in lieu of $3,653,000.
Mrs. Ritchie.
You know, this is giving me a headache. I'm not good with numbers to begin with. But didn't the governor just say he wasn't cutting our stuff by like $9 million? That was operating? Okay. But he's not touching the capital?
Well, they haven't given it all yet.
Oh. So we're asking for an additional 3, and I'm assuming, I don't know, how much is so we're asking for an additional $3 million to build another addition on top.
Well, we're already planning an addition there. It's already been the ed specs, the schematic designs, the design developments have already been approved by this board. They've all been reviewed by the state of Maryland. The Interagency Committee on School Construction and the State Board of Public Works has already approved the addition, the $3.6 million addition. We would be withdrawing that request from the state, and then we would go back to the state next year, starting from scratch, asking for a $6.6 million project at Eastport.
And what does that do in terms of timeline of putting it? You know, we're asking for an addition, and you want, I understand what you're saying in terms of the overcrowding, but why didn't we ask for that in the beginning?
If you're asking from
Well,
me
I'm
that
just
question,
asking, you know, I mean, was that something we asked for in the beginning? That's not the one we approved. We approved the addition, but not the second level.
Right. It's my understanding that Mr. Jackson is seeking to double the size of the addition that was previously acted upon 3 times by this board and 3 times by the state. And the only way to go about doing that is we would have to notify the state that we are no longer pursuing the project. We would withdraw our request. The monies that were allocated to Eastport would get likely dispensed to some other project or some other county, and then we would start from scratch after July 1.
And what does that do with our timeline? I mean, in terms of when we're going to break ground for the addition?
Well, if it all gets approved, it would be
'Cause I can't remember.
It would be 1 additional year.
Okay.
But the project in this new expanded version may not meet the criteria established by the state, and therefore they may not approve it at all, which means it would be more than a year timeline.
Mrs. Birch.
I actually have more of a macro question than a micro question. How much money did the governor put in his budget for school construction this year?
Approximately $290 million.
And that includes some money that we don't actually have access to, right? I mean, that was...
Yes, ma'am. It's from a variety of sources, but by comparison, so for example, I believe Governor O'Malley's budget last year was something on the order of 353 from all sources.
Right.
And Governor Hogan has put forward, I believe, on the order of 290 from all sources.
Okay, so the pot from the state is also much smaller this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that was my macro question. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, just a quick question for clarification. Would we, in fact, have to withdraw what we already have in motion from the state, as opposed to putting this in the county request for the county to fully fund with respect to bonds and other things that already currently fund school construction, the county side of school construction?
Yes, we would have to officially withdraw the project from the state process.
Okay.
Is there any public comment on this motion?
No, before we vote, I'll remove my motion because I did not have the information that we have to take it from the state or remove it from the state. It was my understanding that I thought we could ask for the additional dollars straight to the county, and the county could fund those. But the staff is saying that they cannot do that.
Okay, so the motion has been withdrawn, and
I will say that it is extraordinarily unfortunate that when you go and walk Eastport Elementary School, they're using every inch of that library, and it is, in my opinion, similar to Davidsonville Elementary School, when we built a brand new school, and then we had the kindergarten edition and everything, or the kindergarten law and all the other stuff, and before you knew it, there were 2 portables sitting outside of Davidsonville Elementary School, and it's a brand new school. And so, I almost feel the exact same way with respect to both of these schools are not going to be able to service the communities in which they serve. Thank you.
Mrs. Nally.
Davidsonville was a different scenario because when the board, I stood down there and begged, and when the board, the state refused to allow us to, it was the state refused to allow us to build a bigger school because there was a pushback from the IAC and Paris Glendenning at the time. But there was no information from the state that they were going to require full-day kindergartens, and 2 years later they did pass full-day kindergartens. So that was the reason why Davidsonville was not anything that the board did. The board tried, but the state would not approve it.
Mrs. Birch.
I'm not certain, but isn't one of the problems at Eastport that its Title I status is kind of working against it with its space? Is there a different space allocation or ed spec given to a school that has Title I status than any other school?
No, ma'am. The whether you're Title I or not doesn't have implications on the size of the rooms that we construct, if that's your direct
question. What about the number of rooms that are constructed?
It's a staffing issue. So the state does not. That's a local decision. You have decided to staff that teacher-student ratio at a lower level. For state purposes, it is still rated at a higher level. They don't differentiate. Here locally in this county, you've made a decision.
So the problem then at a school like Eastport, and I'm sure we have others in the same situation, are that they have more teachers available because of their Title I funds, but they have fewer classrooms. They don't have as many classrooms to put them in, but we can't build them a bigger school just because they have more teachers, because it's based on how many students they have, not on how many teachers they have for those students.
Yes, ma'am. That's been a long-standing you said macro earlier. That's one of the many disconnects at the macro level that has existed for well over 25 years now.
So, and there probably are other schools in our county who have this same push and pull, that you have these wonderful teachers who are there to teach our children and not a space to put them. So you end up.
It's a statewide issue.
Okay. So other districts are having this issue as well. So, okay, that explains a lot for me, because I keep hearing about it and looking at the plans, and I'm like, well, why are they so crowded? And it's because of their ratios and things like that, because they've bought additional positions with their Title I money, and the space is still the same as it would be for any other school in the county.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, no more motions?
The other one is for the other school that's going along the exact same track. But at the end of the day, in 2 years, whether we get a contract school down here or not, we're going to look back at the failed opportunity to be able to have a full two schools have a full second deck to be able to service children. Thank you. Because Tyler Heights Elementary School is not going to get built for another 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Okay, so we will move on while you calculate and come back to the motion for the final total. All right, the next item on our agenda is 5.01 administrative personnel appointments, and there are no appointments for this meeting. Item 5.02 Policy revision, third reading, naming facilities, code EG. This is an action item. Dr. Arlato, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy EG, subject to final correction for style and format.
Is there any board comments or questions? Mr. Jackson.
Yes, ma'am. This is a policy that at first reading, I said I would not be supporting, and I won't be supporting it today or voting for it because I believe that it takes a tool off the table for our community to engage on this very important issue, as well as the historical context of being able to honor people that have done extraordinary work in our education system, in our community, and in other ways. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Burge.
I also serve on the policy committee, and I am very comfortable with this policy. I think that it still allows us to honor people in the community through naming things after them other than an actual school building. I have heard too many horror stories from around this country of buildings that have been named after people where later on issues have come to light that are less than favorable about the person. And I think that just having a policy that prevents that from happening is just a better situation for us. It's my understanding that Howard County has long had a policy where they do not name buildings after people. I don't see any reason for us to name buildings after people. I think it's a good idea, and I think that we should move forward with this. And actually, it's not our policy that does that. That is in the regulation. Our policy is actually very general, and it allows the superintendent to make those sorts of decisions, and it's in the regulation that those decisions are made. So I fully support this policy and the attached regulation.
Mr. Webb.
In Prince George's County, there's an elementary school called Samuel Massey Elementary. Samuel Massey was a chemist at the Naval Academy for years. He also worked on the Manhattan Project. He's got credentials out this long, but he didn't get a name on a building here. And what I'm trying to say is we've got a lot of people in our area that have made significant contributions to education, to the community as a whole. And I believe the community should have an opportunity to name the buildings in their communities if they so choose, and it not be left up to this board to determine that, as long as it meets certain parameters and guidelines. For example, Ms. Burge mentioned she'd heard about some schools where they'd had some incidents where buildings were named after people that later they found were disreputable characters. I think we can put in safeguards to avoid that situation. So I will be voting against this policy.
Is there any public comment on this policy?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Stephen Tillett, Anne Arundel County Branch NAACP. When I heard about this policy, I didn't pay much attention to it at first, but then a couple of people came to me with their concerns, and I've had conversation with a couple of you, and this seems like a solution that's looking for a problem. Kind of like some of the legislation that's been popping up around the country in response to voter fraud when there is no voter fraud. So it's a solution looking for a problem. If there's a person that's made exceptional contributions to our community and naming a school seems appropriate for them, we should have the opportunity to be able to do that, whether it's a wing or a library or the entire building. And if there's a situation where there's been a significant fall from grace in the life of an individual for whom the school was named, Bill Cosby Elementary School or Ben Roethlisberger High School comes to mind. If that happens, then take their name off. But I don't think that we should prophylactically punish folks that deserve to be honored in the interest of the rare likelihood, the rare instances where we might have to take a name off of a building. So I oppose this legislation, and I am urging you to do the same.
Okay, all those in favor of policy EG? Opposed? Motion fails 4-3. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to, as the chair of the policy committee, take this policy and regulation back to the policy committee, revisit it with some guidance and some thoughts relative to this board, of which we can have a conversation, and take another look at both the regulation and the policy in light of the current vote, ma'am.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 5.03, policy JEF, reporting child abuse neglect. Dr. Arlotto, your recommendation, please.
Yes, ma'am. I recommend approval of policy JEF, subject to final correction for style and format.
Are there any board comments or questions? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor of policy JEF? Motion passes 7-0-0. The next item on the agenda is item 5.04, items of legislation. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Ms. Kutches.
I have to look at the clock. Good afternoon. Okay. This, as you recall from last time, Section 1 are bills that I will ask for you to take a vote or a position on. Section 2 is just for your information, and Section 3, your position has already been established by the 2015 legislative program that you approved in November. Starting with the first bill on your sheet, HB 44. Essentially, this bill requires that parents of a child with an IEP or a family service plan may have a document that's related to the IEP and the family service plan, translate it within 30 days after the date of the request. We are asking that you oppose this bill. We feel that we are already providing quite a bit of services as far as to parents who don't speak English as a first language. They are provided interpreters at the IEP meetings. There would be an enormous fiscal impact to this requirement, and we're not quite sure that this mandate would actually be the most effective way to assist families where English is not a first language. For instance, translations with terms of art and education sometimes don't translate to all dialects in a way that one could understand. Additionally, we don't know if the parents with those documents would actually find them helpful if they, have trouble reading in their own home language, which we've talked about as this board. So for those reasons, we are recommending that you oppose this bill.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Birch.
I just want to say that everyone knows that I'm a strong supporter of providing as much support as we can to our international community, but I think this does go too far, and it's actually having us waste resources that we could be better using other ways, and so I will be opposing this legislation.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0-0.
HB 159, Special Education Standards and Workload Guidelines for Teachers and Related Services Providers. Essentially, this requires the State Board to adopt regulations that would provide workload guidelines for our special education teachers. This is an unfunded mandate because essentially, if passed, these requirements would result in an increase in the number of IEP clerks. Our county has been very proactive in this area by providing the administrative duties associated with IEPs to various staff and providing for this issue in various ways. So we do feel like we are trying to deal with the issue, but this bill is an unfunded mandate that we are suggesting that you oppose.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 6-0. Are you opposed? Motion passes 5-1.
Okay, HB 298, Education Student Data Privacy Act of 2015. Essentially, this bill prohibits a service provider, so this would be a company that we partner with to provide electronic services for our students. It prohibits them from using any student personally identified information for any purpose other than what we contracted them for. We are asking that you support this bill. This bill does address many of the concerns we've had regarding the protection of student data when contracting with outside vendors, and it protects student information so that it can only be used for pre-K to 12 purposes for which we contract it with the vendor. It also prohibits the advertising to students or creating student profiles to sell to other vendors.
Mrs. Ritchie.
And don't we have some of this already with FERPA and stuff? I mean, it just adds another layer. I don't have any problem with it. I mean, but
yes, it closes some loops that would be favorable to student privacy. And yes.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting this bill? Motion passes 6-0-0.
Senate Bill 210, Education Institutions Personal Electronic Account Privacy Protection. Essentially, this bill provides privacy protections for students and provides standards so that extracurricular coaches and sponsors can't require students to alter their electronic account information or have anything to do with that before acceptance into a sports activity or program. So we're suggesting that you support this bill.
Mrs. Burge.
So the exception at the bottom that eliminates or doesn't include things like if your teacher signs you up for Quizlet or some academic thing, they can be involved with that. But if you have a Facebook account, they can't have you do anything about that.
Right. Essentially, the bill says that you can't force a student, I want your password to Facebook in order for you to make the basketball team.
So that I know what you're putting on there. And
right.
I
Or
can
you
keep
have
track.
to friend me in order to make.
Are they really doing that?
I don't know, but it seems like a good protection for students and for staff so that it doesn't put either party in a bad situation.
Mrs. Ritchie.
again, we already have some policies that relate to this in terms of when you said that about the Facebook and the account, things like that. We have policies in place in our county already that say how these things can occur. So our county, our teachers can't go out and ask for your, well, they can, but really they shouldn't. And if they get caught, they get in trouble. So the thing is, this is just saying that you can't request this. I mean, I don't have any problem with it. I'm just saying we already have some of this in place.
Right, and as in a lot of situations with legislation, Anne Arundel County Public Schools is often ahead of the curve, and you'll hear that in some of the other bills as well. But this would make it a statewide mandate to protect students and teachers across the state.
And how does this affect like a cyberbullying investigation? That would just be turned over to the police, and the police would be able to
This
access.
is not a criminal law that would be instituted. I'm not sure what the repercussions were for a violation of that, so I'm not sure quite how to answer your question. I think it would be something that would be considered and included in any sort of discipline of someone that did violate this if it were made into a law.
Mrs. Ritchie.
That doesn't preclude us from being able to say if we have a student that's being bullied for our Office of Investigation to be able to do that. What it says is we can't require it. So it would not allow us to do it in the sense that if there was a cyberbullying case and we wanted to help the student investigate further, but we needed to have access to their accounts and stuff, we can talk to them about that. And if they choose to give it to us, we can, and we can go there. If they choose not to, that's their choice as well. This is just saying we can't make it a
Right, and I apologize, Ms. Scorblack. I misunderstood what you were getting at. You were saying if there was an investigation into cyberbullying and we needed some information that was on a Facebook site or something, that's a different situation. That's entirely different. This is just saying in order to make the team. So yeah, they're two different things.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting the bill? Motion passes 6-0-0.
Senate Bill 228, Supplemental Public School Construction Matching Fund Program. Essentially, this bill creates a state-funded public school construction matching fund program for LEAs with 140,000 students or more. This would only apply to Montgomery County, given the limited resources that exist in the current fiscal climate. We are asking that you oppose this bill because it would drain money away from Anne Arundel County Public Schools and our construction cost needs.
Mrs. Ritchie?
Have we ever considered amending it so that it would include us? I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
Last year, this bill included Montgomery County, Baltimore County, and Prince George's County. And this year, it's just Montgomery County. So that bill last year did fail when it was those three, and now Montgomery County is taking a shot at it. I'm not sure on the, how far it's going to get, but.
Yeah, no, I just was wondering. I mean, if we thought that this was a valuable something, then we could amend it, but I got no problem.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0-0.
Senate Bill 278, Public Schools Health and Safety Food Transparency. This bill requires for a local school system to, on their website, include all food or drinks that are sold at breakfast, lunch, and a la carte, and provide the brand name, the flavor of the item, and the nutritional information. Here in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, we already actually do this. It is on our website, and it's all included. However, we do think that this is overly burdensome for all school systems to require it. We feel it's a local issue, and that we do feel like we're addressing the spirit and intent of this bill. There is also a part of it that speaks to having to do regular mailings to schools if one school has a different a la carte item than another. So we feel that's a little bit overreaching into our business as to how we communicate with parents on this issue. So we're, for those reasons, ask that you oppose this bill.
I'm all for sharing nutrition data, but if we're posting the brand already on our website, aren't the companies required by law to post their nutrition data on their own websites? So a parent could still go and get the nutrition data.
Right, and all of that is on our website. Ms. Rissy shared with me that they actually scan in when they get a new product in. They scan it in every month, and I looked at it when preparing for this bill, and it's all there. It's great.
Any public comment? All those in favor of opposing this bill? Motion passes 7-0-0.
Senate Bill 296, Public Schools Thirsty Kids Act. This bill requires each public school to make available unlimited drinking water for students. It requires that schools include a reusable water bottle on their school supply list every year. And it requires that for students in kindergarten through 12th grade, that schools provide flat bottom biodegradable cups for drinking water in each location where meals are served. Given that level of detail, obviously this is an overarching into this public schools operations. It even provides a weekly cleaning schedule that would have to be established by each school. We're asking that you oppose this bill.
Is there any public comment? Mrs. Burge.
So they have a schedule for cleaning the water bottles that the kids brought to school with them?
The schools would have to establish a weekly cleaning schedule is what the bill says.
Well, when are they going to start washing the gym uniforms so that my kid doesn't bring them home? I would like that too. Please? I mean, if we have to wash the water bottles, you might as well do laundry too, right?
And just as a point of clarification, all of our schools are equipped with water fountains to provide drinking water with students. Spoke to Food and Nutrition Services, and there's drinking water when food is served if it is needed.
Are we already asking or encouraging students to bring a reusable water bottle to school on school supply lists?
I honestly don't know what schools are doing on their school supply list with drinking water bottles.
I mean, I think that's a fine idea, but I understand the
It
rest
might
of
not
the
need to be legislated.
Correct. Mrs. Norman?
Janet Norman, Annapolis, 787 Annapolis Neck Road. I just hope that you all can embrace the idea behind this bill and maybe see if you can get it amended to take out the onerous portions that you find about cleaning the bottles and stuff. Many schools don't allow students to have water bottles at their desk. My son has a project in the countywide science fair on lactose intolerance. I mean, do you have any idea what percentage of your kids are lactose intolerant? By ethnicity, Hispanics is about 51%, Anglos about 20%, Southeast Asians 90%. So within the school lunch program, if you don't get the milk serving, you have to pay extra for a bottle of drinking water. Drinking water is $60 or $1 more on the a la carte menus just to get water with your lunch. So whatever you can do to encourage the entire school system to have cups and pitchers of water and have water be a valid option, that would help kids very much, cut down on calories and stay more hydrated. Thank you.
Mrs. Birch?
Well, Ms. Norman, I have 2 of those Hispanic children, and it's 50 cents for an 8-ounce bottle of water and $1 for a 16-ounce bottle of water, which show up on my little meal thing every day. Right. So our lunch actually costs more than everybody else's. We've now gotten my son to bring a water bottle with him every day. So I'm finally saving a little bit of money. But yeah, but because they have to, for the nutritional standards, include the milk, even though they don't drink it, they then throw their milk away every day.
I suspect it's also better for the environment that we don't throw away a lot of plastic bottles every day. Mrs. Ritchie?
Did I hear you say we have water fountains in all of our schools?
You did.
Okay.
All those in favor of opposing the bill as it exists? Opposed? Abstaining? Motion passes 601.
House Bill 1033, and I apologize at the time of printing this had not been issued a number yet, but this is the Public Schools, Non-Public Schools Sexual and Physical Abuse Notification and Prevention Bill. Essentially, this bill provides that if an employee or an adult working on school property as a contractor, a subcontractor, or a paid leader of a school activity is arrested for a reportable offense, then the law enforcement agency, if they know that, has to notify the local school system. Then the local school system, within 5 days of that notification, must notify school employees and parents of students who attend any school in the county where the accused worked during the school year in which the incident occurred. It also mandates school employees must receive annual training in identifying signs of sexual abuse and assault. We recommend that you support this with amendments, specifically that all contractors and subcontractors working on school property, being included in the notification requirement may be too broad. It doesn't take into account the contractor or subcontractor that may be working on school property but not actually on dealing with students or ever seeing students. For example, the delivery man who delivers some sort of material to a construction site that never once has any interactions with the employees at the school or the staff there. Additionally, the annual training we do as part of onboarding or as part of new employee orientation, employees do receive training such as this, but it is not an annual training. So the recommended amendment would be to reflect an initial training for all employees and then perhaps an annual training for staff who regularly work with children. For those reasons, we ask you to support with the amendments just explained.
Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting with amendments? Opposed? You're in favor? Okay. Motion passes 7-0-0.
Senate Bill 508, Children, Child Care Facilities, Public School and Non-Public Schools, Contractors and Subcontractors. This bill prohibits a county board from knowingly hiring or retaining an individual or a contractor or subcontractor from knowingly hiring or retaining an individual who has been convicted of a crime of violence of child sex abuse. We're recommending that you support this with amendments. The bill's very well intentioned, and we actually already follow this here in our system for all of our employees. However, it is too broad in that it includes prohibition on contractors and subcontractors to hire anyone, not just those that work at schools. So if we contract with Coca-Cola, for example, and they have a night custodian at their branch, somewhere not near our schools, they actually couldn't hire that person either under this bill. And so we're worried about the people that are specifically related to the school system. So we just would support it, but just say that it would be amended to include only contractors or subcontractors that are working on school property.
Yeah. Is there any public comment? All those in favor of supporting with amendments? Motion passes 7-0-0.
And then unless there's any other questions about any other bills,
They don't require a vote.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is 6.01, monthly financial status report. This is a review item. Is there any board questions for 601? Any public comment? Okay. Item 7.01, award of contract for psychiatric services to the Maryland Centers for Psychiatry. This is an information to action item. Do I have a motion to move this from information to action? All those in favor? We now have an action item. Dr. Olato, your recommendation.
Thank you. I recommend that the Board of Education award contract number 15SC-072 for psychiatric services to Maryland Centers for Psychiatry, PA, in the estimated amount of $220,000.
Is there any public comment on this? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. So now we're ready to go back to the item 4.01, Superintendent's recommended fiscal year 2016 operating and capital budget. Do we have numbers?
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Alex Shacknova, Chief Operating Officer. The amended superintendent's recommendation would need to be as follows. For the FY 2016 operating budget recommendation, the correct figure would be $1,103,435,499, and I'll repeat that: 1,103,435,499. There were no successful amendments to the capital budget. Therefore, the capital budget remains at $163,090,000, unaltered.
Mrs. Ritchie.
Now, Mr. Shacknovich, I can't do math, so could you give me the difference between what was presented and what we requested?
Yes, ma'am. The amendments that were approved today were on the floor were $2,464,027. So those were the amendments that were approved by the colleagues here. So $464,027. And remember that the budget also had to account for the shift in revenue that occurred, the almost $4.8 million shift in revenue that occurred by transferring the cut from the state government to the county government line. Exactly, that was $4,779,160. Put together, the maintenance of effort requirement from the county remains unchanged. That's $11.3 million. We will be asking for approximately $27.3 million over the maintenance of effort number from the county government.
So Tyson, do I need to have a motion to amend Dr. Arlotto's original recommendation? Do we need to vote on it?
Yes. The cleanest way to do it is to have someone move to amend the budget to a certain dollar amount, and then to have that seconded and discussed if anyone wants to discuss, and then voted on. That makes the record clear.
Okay, so Mrs. Nally will amend.
I move that we amend the superintendent's recommendation for an FY 2016 operating budget to $1,103,435,499 operating, and any approved adjustments. And for 2016, there will be no, the capital budget would remain the same.
All those in favor of the amendment? So that of the
budget as amended.
Not the budget, but the amendment going forward. Right? We vote on this motion first. No.
Well,
okay.
you do, but you also need to give an opportunity for discussion.
Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with any of the numbers there. I would just like to ask a question. Is the budget as it is here what is transmitted to the county?
No, sir.
Okay, so only the number is what's transmitted, or the state categories, or what actually is transmitted. And the reason I'm asking the question is because I don't want to send over to the county the comment that says we're not complying with all laws regarding language access for our bilingual facilitators. I want to make sure that that language, if this is going anywhere, gets taken out, because it's not correct. It's not correct, as was said by Dr. Arlotto a little earlier today.
The county government will receive a high-level overview, which is similar to the briefing packet that the board has before you adjusted, and then they will also receive the full version of the budget. Embedded in that will be any amendments that are passed by this Board of Education, so we can make that editorial adjustment. It's not a financial adjustment, so that's fairly easy to make.
Okay, so as long as we can have that rolled in there, that's just a concern I have. Thank you.
Mr. Webb.
Mr. Sextonovich, I'm just wondering, what is the percentage increase of the superintendent's proposed budget over current versus what it will be with the amendments?
The superintendent's budget amounted to an approximately 3.6% year-over-year increase. The amended budget would be approximately 3.9% year-over-year increase.
Thank you.
Okay, I have no more board comments. Any public comments? All those in favor of the motion as amended? All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, motion passes 7-0-0. Now we're voting on the budget, correct? All right, Dr. Arlotto's recommendation as amended is for the FY 2016 operating budget of $1,103,435,499 and a capital budget of $163,090,000. Is there any public comment? All those in favor? Motion passes 7-0-0. Before we adjourn back to closed session, I have a few announcements. The next Board of Education meeting is Wednesday, March 4th at 10 a.m. The next Board Budget Committee meeting is Wednesday, February 25th at 12:30 p.m. The next Board Policy Committee meeting is Wednesday, March 11th at 8:30 a.m. And the board will hold a public outreach event on Tuesday, February 24th at the Glen Burnie Branch Library from 6 to 8 p.m. Mrs. Nally.
I would like to move to go into closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter and to conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to the negotiations.
All those in favor? The meeting is now adjourned.